Welcome to the Tenet Podcast. I'm Todd Pearson here with my friend and partner, and known to many as quite possibly the most interesting man in the world, Wes Brown.
Todd, how you doing, my friend? Oh my God, it's another week.
Good. It's fucking snowy as all get out today.
Yeah, I big accomplishment today. I actually shoveled my driveway and didn't have a massive coronary event. So I'm feeling good about myself.
I'm feeling good about it too, because otherwise I'd be here with your wife doing this.
Or flying solo.
Or flying solo. Yeah. But that would be a disappointment. No, I know we need the water. I'm happy for it. But at the same time, I'm kind of over snow, at least for the moment.
I think Arizona's in your future.
I don't think Arizona's in my future, but maybe you can talk me into it.
I think New Mexico's better for you. You're like a enchantment, the place of enchantment kind of place.
Yes.
So,
I like the land of enchantment.
There you go. I never get that. I do.
You live on the road of enchantment.
I do. I should just move to New Mexico and just be done with it, right?
Then you could be south instead of north of me.
That's right.
I heard Houston is quaint. Doesn't snow there.
No. Doesn't snow there.
I heard it sucks. Plus there's hurricanes.
Oh my God. And the humidity is probably a little high.
Yeah. Touch.
Yeah. That's out for me.
If you like walking around looking like you jumped in the swimming pool with all your clothes on, Houston's the place for you.
Yeah, that's right. I used to live in South Carolina and that was like hell. Florida isn't much better. Although at Florida, you have a lot of New York people. So good delis and stuff like that. But South Carolina was a bit much as far as humidity. Beautiful, beautiful place to live though. So, but except for the swamps by Beaufort. Anyway, cooking those swamps in the August heat. That's always fun.
I have this buddy who he moved with his fiance back home to Jamestown, North Dakota in like mid-November. Yeah. She didn't like it. So then they decided to move to this other beautiful place he had lived, coastal North Carolina, right before hurricane season. They got evacuated about a month after they moved in. So then she didn't like that. So then they moved to Tucson in June. So they're just hitting all the, spots at the primo time of the year.
Right.
Yeah.
So did you ever land at a place that you liked?
They're actually the people I was telling you about before we started recording that live in Jerome. So they bailed out of Houston and went to Jerome, Arizona, which they do like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's temperate,
Yeah.
Up in the mountains.
That's right. It's got some elevation to it. Go ahead, Todd. You keep wanting to jump in.
I was just going to say, those are some good life lessons. I learned that when I moved my ex-wife to Fairbanks, Alaska in August one year. And it snowed like the day after we arrived, and it was snowing and cold. Yeah. It's Alaska, man.
Jesus Christ. Oh my God.
Alaska. And and then once it snows once, that's it. Game on. 9 months of snow and cold.
And that was probably fine until it got dark forever.
Yeah, exactly.
What's that like, Todd? Where it's forever dark? I mean, are you far enough north where you only get so many hours of daylight, or do you get any?
Yeah, well, Fairbanks is in like this valley, right? So in addition to being so far north that you get very little daylight, you're talking like, I think 4.5 hours of daylight at the winter solstice. You get this phenomenon called ice fog, where the particulates from the emissions from vehicles freeze. So it's always like foggy. And then, you're so far north, the sun just kind of sits on the horizon the entire day. And we're talking, it's very brief. So growing up, I didn't notice it very much. It didn't affect me, the darkness, but holy shit, when I moved back there as an adult after living in Colorado and all the sunshine that we get here. Yeah. There's a reason why people, they start pulling bodies out of the river and finding people with their, heads blown off in these cabins out in the woods, because people lose their minds. And, it's also a great reason to become an alcoholic or drug addict.
Right. If you need one, if you need a reason,
if you need a vice, If you want to self-medicate, Fairbanks, Alaska is your place.
Now, I have a seasonal affective disorder. Do you think that would be a bad place for me to move?
Oof.
Yeah, I think it'd be rough, man. I think you're investing in a lot of I think you're making a lot of purchases through Amazon to build up your UV light collection.
Yeah, right.
Oh my God.
Anyway, I should introduce our guest for this week, right?
Yeah, we should. Although
we're already engaged.
Very familiar to our
I
listeners.
know,
So.
and he does have a wonderful voice.
He does.
I've already been talking, so
it's like a warm blanket almost.
That's funny because when I hear myself recorded,
it sounds like this. So I don't know what is going on with that.
That's what
awesome.
We all think when we hear ourselves. Our guest this week is a conceptual artist, publisher, printer, founder, and special agent in charge at the Institute of Sociometry. It might sound familiar to you folks. And an associate professor of art at Metropolitan State University of Denver. He's no stranger to the podcast. He was last on in November with his partner, Heather, talking about the IS Fair and the Institute of Sociometry. He currently has an exhibition at Dateline Gallery that runs through the 30th of March entitled PaCT, A Journey Beyond the Horizon. Welcome back to the program, Peter Miles Bergman.
Hey.
Did I get out correct?
Yeah, that seemed all accurate.
Okay, good. Yeah. I should have made up some stuff and thrown it in there next time, though.
Yeah. I love that, actually. I love it. Like, I remember the very first time I had something published anywhere, it came back and it was all weird, like, where did they get this? It bugged me for a little bit, but then I was like, I love this. I love that they just make stuff up. And then it happens like every time I've ever, almost every time I've ever had something, an interview or whatever, you're like, so that's the thing, huh? That's the made up thing. It's great.
I once, for a little while, there was a short-lived publication in Santa Fe. So I was freelancing for them and they wanted a bio. So I just made up this, I was like, this is so stupid. Like, who gives a shit? Like, nobody reads these bios anyway. So I just made up a bunch of stuff. And then the publisher or editor got back to me. He's like, I can't publish this. Like, you. I'm like, okay, whatever.
They fact checked you?
Well, I mean, it was outrageous, but I was like, why don't we have some fun with it? Instead of just like Todd Pearson is a freelance photographer based in Denver, Colorado.
It was like the bio you were giving Wes on earlier episodes.
Yeah.
Right. About being stunt double on Magnum PI.
That's right. Yeah.
I love that. I mean, and
we're making it fun.
Yeah. Got to have fun with it.
Yeah.
I mean, who really cares? Who takes themselves that? I mean, you don't strike me as somebody that takes themselves that seriously. I think you're serious about what you do as your practice and as an artist, but at the same time, I don't think that you think that, put yourself on this pedestal or any bullshit.
I don't care about that. I mean, I'm serious. I'm like seriously unserious. That's like my whole bent,
I think that's why I like you, man.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So you got this exhibition that's going on at Dateline Gallery. Talk about the name and what this is all about, how it came about.
Sure. Yeah. So the name is PaCT. So, PACT, but it's capital P, lowercase a, and then capital C and capital T, and kind of typeset in a way so that the P, the C, and the T are evenly spaced, and the A is kind of nestled in between the P and the C. And that's because the setting for all this work is on the PCT, which is the Pacific Crest Trail, which is a 2,650 mile trail that goes from Mexico to Canada along the geologic crest of the West Coast, where the Pacific plate kind of meets the North American plate and is pushed up like the Sierras and the Cascades. And then the PaCT is the kind of raison d'etre for the work and the show. So when I was young, starting probably as a teenager, growing up in Wyoming, I found out about the Pacific Crest Trail, which was initiated in 1968 So this would have been in like the 80s. I was a pretty outdoorsy kid. And I thought, someday I want to hike that. And I had a pretty good friend, like skateboard buddy, just fellow weirdo in Laramie, Wyoming, where I was growing up, Dylan Kuhn. And we found ourselves, it was my summer after my freshman year of college. And he kind of doing I think they call it a gap year now, but back then they called it being a dropout. We found ourselves in Laramie, kind of like living with our dads, but we're like 19. We had already kind of lived independently, and we're like, it's time to kind of strike out on our own. And we got in his van and moved up to Jackson, Wyoming, which is about 8 hours from Laramie. And we lived in the woods, camping out all summer. And we worked as condo cleaners in Teton Village. And we had a really intense bonding experience and a super intense one-night metaphysical journey that still profoundly affects me to this day, but is maybe a digression we can return to because that's important, but it would get me off track. And during that summer, we were like, let's do this. Let's hike the PCT. Maybe when I'm done with college. So in 1996, after about 4 years of thinking about it, and then like probably about 18 months of dedicated planning, we hit the trail in mid-August with the intention to spend 4 months hiking the entire thing. So that's about, our itinerary was going to be about 20 miles a day right out of the gate, maintain that for about 1,700 miles, and then step it up to about 35 miles a day, which is not uncommon for people who hike the PCT to go that hard. We needed to do that in that amount of time so Dylan could return to college. He had already been accepted at DePaul in Chicago. And he had it timed so that we were going to walk 2,650 miles over the course of 4 months. And that would give him 8 days to hitchhike back to New Mexico, pack up his entire house, move to Chicago, find an apartment, and start school. So a little bit of like the hubris of youth there, thinking that that's possible, right? It was a very high snow year, and we were kind of starting early because of our limited time window. And so about 550 miles in, we hit snowpack. We were on snowpack for over 100 miles. Didn't see another person for over 100 miles. So like maybe 5-6 days, crossed 10 passes over 11,000 feet in 9 days. So we had a twofer one day. Swimming, it's like up over a pass, down into a valley, swim 4 or 5 nipple deep rivers of runoff, back up over a pass. And it was an amazing adventure, but very physically hard on our bodies. And we hadn't really planned food very well. It was the first time either of us had ever done anything like this. And in fact, my very first overnight backpack trip was day one of that trip. So Dylan was a very experienced backpacker, and I was really experienced outdoors person in general. I just had never gone backpacking. But we didn't plan our food very well. I was, Dylan's like 6'1", I'm 6 feet. At the time, I think I weighed, starting off, day one, I weighed like 165. So it's pretty rail thin. Dylan, an inch taller, probably weighed about 5 pounds less. So that's just our natural metabolism at 23. And we both lost 20 pounds in the first 30 days. So, you're like, we had a thing of squeeze butter that we would suck on, like just suckle on, like it was a teat, just sucking on the squeeze butter. And you just couldn't get enough of it, just so calorie deprived. So anyway, when we got to Northern Oregon, I was in pretty bad shape. It'd take me about 5 miles in the morning to get to where my feet would numb out and I could walk on them normally. He had a pinched like sciatic nerve in his back. He's running out of money too. He didn't tell me that at the time, but he knew he was going to go broke. And just the thought of like stepping up the miles just seemed incomprehensible. So in Bernie Falls, California, we decided to call it. And we knew we weren't going to make it. But, we talked, and we still had that was in maybe late July. We still had some time, and we're like, let's slow it down. Let's go to Oregon. Let's make it another 200 miles to Oregon. Just have a good time, kind of like take it slow, stretch out, take some 0 days, which is like days with no miles. And Dylan, I think he felt really bad about, he was the one ultimately that called it. And I think he felt bad about it. He, and not just, in relationship to me, but, himself, like this is like one of the first things that either one of us had ever done where we just kind of failed to meet the objective. We're like young men, kind of prime of our lives. And you don't really think about your limits. And you certainly don't think about finding your physical limits by doing something as simple as walking, And he was like, let's come back next summer and we'll finish the remaining 900 miles. We'd gone 2/3 of the way. We'll finish the remaining 900 miles across Oregon and Washington next summer. And in my mind, I was like, you fucking idiot. I'm never going to do this again. Like I'm never, like, I don't know why I did it this time. And so my response in my kind of like, more prankish way of formulating things, I was like, no, man, let's come back when we're twice as old as we are now. So we're 23. Let's do it when we're 46, which to me was another way of saying never, because, like it's just preposterous, right? Are you even going to be alive? Like there's so many factors. And he's like, all right, deal, and then it became like the PaCT. So when we stopped, we wrote it down in a trail register. Like I, Peter Miles Bergman, and I, Dylan K. Kuhn, solemnly, like we made a formal agreement. We couldn't even figure out. I think initially we were like, that's in 2018, but like, the math was wrong even. And also Dylan had turned 24 while we were on the trip. So it's like, well, it's twice as old, 46 or is it 48? It's super confusing, to think that far ahead. But at some point in the aughts, we're like 2019. I think we settled on 2018. 2018 is the year, But then in 2017, right around the time you'd start planning something like this, Dylan's like, after spending probably like half of his adult life being a itinerant kind of nomadic person, living in a truck. He lived in a truck topper for 3 or 4 years, just going to climbing spots, freelance software engineer at the time. He's like, Hey, I bought a condo and I got a full-time job, at like 40, 44 years old. It's like, dude, that's not what you do when you're about to take, 4 months off to go hiking. So we put it off another year to 2019. And we did it, man. We got back together at this very same spot. We quit walking in 1996, and not exactly the same date we stopped, but around the same time of year, mid-August, and walked to Canada and got there in the first week of October. But, as an artist, both times, even very consciously being an artist in 1996 at 23, there was this conscious effort on my part to create some work along the way. And, you don't want to carry stuff with you. You're not going to bring up oil pastels or whatever. I wasn't going to do that anyway, because I'm a conceptual artist, not a drawer of pictures. But what can I do, and what can I do with him to collaborate and create some work along the way? And there were 2 projects. One of them involved a photo animation, and one of them involved just kind of like the presentation of self, like how you present yourself to the world. And when we stopped walking, which, I can elaborate on those here in a second, but when we stopped walking, we plan to continue those in the far off year of 2019, in the next century, and one of them really worked out and one of them kind of didn't, but the one that didn't was maybe a little even more revealing or profound to me as an artist than the one that did. So yeah, that's the premise. And we'll kind of maybe see if that prompts any questions before diving into what that art is, or if you want to hear the crazy metaphysical story about that summer in Jackson.
Yeah, we'll want to hear both, because I even wrote down a metaphysical journey. So I'm really interested in that. But let's talk about the Pacific Crest Trail right off the bat. Sure. I see, that a lot of people have done, I won't say a lot, but people do it quite regularly. Yeah. It seems like they always start in Mexico. Is there a reason to start down south?
Yeah.
Heat or?
It's the seasons. So most people will take about 6 months, 5.5 to 6 months. So the factors you got to consider are water in the desert. So starting early in the spring is a good idea. Giving enough time for snow to melt in the Sierras, because the Sierras are, they're the tallest mountains in the continental U.S., taller than Mount Whitney's the tallest mountain in the continental U.S. So you're up high, you're above 10,000 feet for a long time in the Sierras. And then finishing before, the conventional wisdom is like finish before like mid-September, because the North Cascades can get pretty gnarly weather-wise in the fall. So that's, northbound, Nobo, they call it. Sobo, which is southbound, Sobos are like the misfits of the PCT. So you'll start meeting Sobos and everyone has Sobo jokes. It's like being a Sobo on the trail is like being the drummer in a band, It's like you're the person everybody kind of dogs on. There's jokes about them, right? Sobos start in August and go into late fall, even early winter. And it is very popular now. They have a permit system that caps out at 5,000 and they fill it every single year. Wow. And people from all over the world do it. And there's a whole culture built up around it. And it's one of three major north-south trails. There's the PCT, the CDT, Continental Divide Trail, that goes through Colorado, and then the AT, the Appalachian Trail, it's on the East Coast. And people try to do all three, which is a triple crown. In 1996, it was less of a thing. I think I'd have to look exactly, but I remember about 500 people trying to through hike the PCT in 96, and it's somewhere in the neighborhood of like 50 to 70 finishers. So that's like a real small pod compared to nowadays. And that was one of the main things that, people would always ask us, like, well, what's different? And it's like, man, the number of people, because in 96, like you didn't hardly see another hiker ever, maybe when you start out, because even back then, you'd have 2 or 3 groups starting off each day, because there's a limited season, there's like a 1 month window that you start. But we passed our first like 4 days, we passed 20 people and then like never saw another person because we were booking it, So in 2019, it's just like constant people. And everyone's got a trail name, and like there's this whole kind of culture to it. And a lot of people are like vlogging or blogging, or there's people who do it so often that it impacts their other career prospects or like their relationships. And so they try to make a whole living off it, by becoming sponsored, or like influencer cultures kind of permeated it. Whereas in 1996, you'd go through a little town, the trail goes right through the middle of it, and people didn't even know that was a thing, Yeah. They just thought you were a hobo. And not only a hobo, but a hobo in their weird little rural town. Like, what the heck are you doing here? So, it was very different experience both times. But nowadays, real popular. And it's really, the two biggest groups of people demographically out on the trail are people in their early 20s. So just finished college or trade school. And then people in their maybe mid 50s to mid 60s, just retired.
Yeah. Todd, it's our turn.
Yeah. Get out there.
I don't know if, I could use the 20.
Peter did it without any prior experience.
Right.
That's right.
Which is I always think that's both good and bad, because if you've never done any long distance hiking, you don't really know what you're in for, so you can't build this thing up in your mind. Like, I don't know, as the day got nearer the second time around, were you kind of like praying for the fucking comet to hit the earth? Or
Oh man, there are times. Yeah, there are times. The officially unofficial motto of through hiking, which is what the nomenclature of this has become. It's THRU hiking, all is one word, which is like generally over 500 miles, in one continuous hike, so maybe a through hike. But usually it's referring to trying to do the entire trail. But the officially unofficial motto of through hiking is embrace the suck, because it sucks. It's like, people, you get back from something like that, people are like, oh, did you have fun on your trip? It's just like,
right.
Fuck no. Like it'd be like asking someone right after they finished a marathon if they had fun.
Climbing a major mountain like Everest,
Yeah.
It's not fun. It's the idea that you've accomplished something that you set out to do. Like you had this goal.
Yeah.
It's not for the faint of heart. Not a lot of people do it. And then you have like this badge of honor. Like, hey, I hiked the Pacific Crest Trail.
Yeah. Although, Dylan, my hiking partner, Dylan, he disputes that. He does have fun. He much more so than the average person. He really enjoys being outside. His whole recreational life is being in the mountains and hiking, being outside. It takes a lot of suck for him to quit having fun. And that helps me. That helps me get through some times where I'm really not having a good time, because he really, like when you're out, you've been out for 35 days and the last like 9 days, it's rained, freezing rain 24/7. And then it starts to snow. Dylan's like, isn't it cool that it's snowing right now? I love the snow. He's got that kind of attitude, so it's kind of like, it's great.
In that moment, right? There's that thought of like, you know what? Dylan is really like right on the money. Like, this is really beautiful. You can embrace it. Mm-hmm. Or you're like standing on a knife edge on the mountain and you're like, should I push this motherfucker off? Or
yeah. No, but we have the right blend of, we're both very stoic personalities. Like you'll never hear a complaint out of either one of us, no matter how bad it gets, and then he finds joy in things that I don't, and then I'm like, we even call it the Pete cast on the trail. Like I'm just telling stories the whole time. So it's like, I'm the entertainment. He's the navigation. He always knows where we are. He's the planner. He knows how much food we're going to need, so we're a good team in that way,
So you're providing the soundtrack and he's doing what he needs to do to get you where you need to go.
Yeah. Or like if we, when we hitchhike, I'm like in the designated like front seat where you have to talk to the driver and entertain the driver, because like, I don't know if y'all do any hitchhiking or have done any hitchhiking, but part of the implicit bargain is you have to entertain the driver. That's why they pick you up, basically,
Yeah. I've only hitchhiked in California and South Carolina. It was out of necessity. So
yeah. Well, I mean, this is out of necessity, because like you need to get into a town to resupply or whatever. But
right.
I've hitchhiked run out of gas and stuff for sure.
Yeah.
But even then, it's like it's like you're on. and next up is this freak I'm about to pull over and pick up. They've got some story. I've actually got a great hitchhiking story.
Oh, let's hear it.
Write that down, Wes, and I can. Okay, you want me to do that one?
Yeah,
right
might
now?
as well just knock it out.
Okay, so in '96, we're about 400 miles in. We just crossed the Mojave Desert. Starting to see the Sierras. There's this town called Mojave that's kind of smack in the northern edge of the Mojave Desert. It's about 100 miles straight north of Los Angeles. And we're gunning it to make it to the town of Mojave before dark. That's our resupply. But we had these old maps and the trail had been rerouted. And it's a little weird in that section because it's just all these dirt roads that kind of cross the desert. So there's not really a trail, which is tenuous because it's like you actually get water out of the LA aqueduct because there's no natural water. And there's only a couple spots where there are access points. So, we had started off at like 3 a.m. to get as far as we could without the heat. And then we kind of did a siesta, and then back into it like 3 p.m. And we have to go up and over the Tehachapi Mountains, which is kind of a low-lying mountain range, to get to Highway 58 to hitchhike into Mojave. And if the sun goes down, it's like, good luck hitching a ride, So we're really packing on the miles, and we get to a part of the Tehachapi Mountains, this big wind farm, and we get to this sign, and it says, and it's almost feeling like a little bit before dusk, maybe an hour of light left. Maybe more. And we get to this sign, and it's like, we thought we were almost there, and it says like 5 miles, Highway 58. It's like, oh shit, because most people will walk like 2.5, 3 miles an hour, right? So we just start booking it, like, speed walking. And at some point I start running, and this is at the tail end of we probably already done about 22, 23 miles, and you just get so adrenaline rushed and so overtired that you get kind of elated, and you're running through this giant wind farm. And I don't know if you've ever been in a wind farm, but they make this eerie noise, like this oscillating sound, but they're all in different cycles of like that tuning. And it's just super weird. It's like the soundtrack to The Shining, and I turn around at some point, I see Dylan running behind me too. And I was like, oh man, this is insane. We're like running with these packs on, and I top out. I can see all the way down. I can see down into this like bottom of this valley, and I can see the highway snaking along. And I'm just like, woo, we're gonna make it. He comes up behind me, and I'm all stoked, and he just looks at me and he goes, the last time I ran was when I got beat up after track practice in 3rd grade, and he was not happy. So, 7th grade. Yeah. Not 3rd grade, 7th grade. Anyway. So that's kind of the setup, we make it down. It's by the time we get down to the highway, it's like headlights are on. We're kind of shadowy figures in the dusk. And this Ford, just kind of like sky blue Ford Taurus, pulls over. First car, and we get in. It's these 2 kind of like dudes with crew cuts and like mirror shades, young, like 25 maybe. And we pile in, and they're like, we had ice axes with us, right? Most people will ship those to Kennedy Meadows, California. We just took them the whole way because you do need to dig holes to poo in, we thought, oh, just use those. And usually when you're hitchhiking with an ice axe, that's like a deterrent for people to pick you up, especially in the desert. It's like, pick up those 2 guys with the ice axes in the desert. But they're like, what are you guys using those for out here? Just totally calm. These guys, 100% unafraid of us. I was like, oh, just, we're going to hike up in the mountains. Oh, okay. Not a lot of questions. They pull out, we're driving, and we're chatting with these guys. And I'm noticing like we're passing every other car on the road. Like it's just standing still. And I kind of look over the shoulder. I'm in the backseat. I look over the guy's shoulder, and the Ford Taurus speedometer goes up to like 110, and then it's got some vague lines after that, and it's just buried past that. So I don't know how fast we're going. We're maybe going 120. Jesus. And he's just got one hand on the wheel, and he keeps like looking back, talking to us. And I'm like, so what are you all up to? And they're like, yeah, we're Navy test pilots. We're coming from Edwards Air Force Base. I was like, oh, okay. Got it. And we're like, when they picked us up, we're about 25 miles from Mojave. But of course we get there in like 10 minutes, because we're going 120 miles an hour. And so I'd been to Mojave a bunch of times because it's close to where I went to high school. But, and it's a pretty small town. And our goal was to go to the Pizza Hut that was on the north end of town, because it's like a Pizza Hut and a grocery store, right? And we're 100% focused on like eat food. So I want to go to the Pizza Hut, and we like blow by the pizza, like I'm like, hey man, we passed where we want to be dropped off, and we're like almost at the other end of town now, right? And he just kind of like looks back over his shoulder. We'd slowed down to go through town, so we're only going like maybe 80. And he looks back on the shoulder. He's like, "Oh, you want to be dropped off back there?" And we're like, "Yeah." He's like, "Okay." And he just kind of like slides his hand over the top of the wheel loosely to like maybe, like the 4 o'clock position. It grips it and he guns it, yanks the parking brake and cranks the wheel like 180 degrees. And we're side drifting across like our lanes, across the median. And there are cars coming the other direction, and we're side drifting into them, going about 80 miles an hour. And then at a certain point, he's just like, let's go to the parking brake, grabs both wheels firmly and just buries his foot through the floorboard. And the cars are like, ah! and then we're just going the other direction, a nice like 35 miles an hour, and then he pulls over and drops us off at the Pizza Hut. So we each ate a large pizza. Dylan fell asleep on the sidewalk in front of the closed grocery store. And so then we're like, we got to get out of here. And we crashed out behind the grocery store in this just tumbleweed lot full of trash. The next day we did our business and we're like, well, we got to hitchhike back out. And we made this sign on cardboard and it says 2 backpackers going to the PCT, only 12 miles, And this guy with like blue blocker shades and a mullet pulls over. He's in a sedan. We pile in. He introduces himself. His name's Robbie. And he's like, "Where are you all going?" It's like, we had he didn't read the sign clearly. And we're like, we're going up here 12 miles to the PCT. He's like, "What's that?" It's like Pacific Crest Trail. I was like, "Oh, you're like backpacking or something?" We got back, we had to put the backpacks in the trunk. And he's like, "Huh." And then awkward silence. And he's like, "You boys don't have any dope on you, do you?" And we're like, "No, sir." Which we didn't, like, "No, sir." He's like, "Okay, good. Because I'm on parole. I just got out of prison a couple days ago. I'm on parole." Nice. And, if we were to get pulled over and you boys had dope on you, I'd have to serve the rest of my sentence. And we're like, "Oh, dang, that's rough, man." But no, we don't have any. He's like, "You're 100% sure you do not have any dope on you." And what does dope even mean to this guy? I don't know. He's probably not talking about a joint, Right. I don't know what he's talking about. But I'm like, no, sir, no, Robbie, we don't have any dope. And then we drove about 5 miles in total silence. And then he just lets out like the deepest sigh, just like, he's like, "I can't believe you guys don't have any dope." Awesome. So that was, in and out of Mojave, right?
That's awesome. I love that.
So, like a 23-year-old, it's, that's fun, that's living life right there.
Yeah.
Like just seeing how people live. And it's like, who's crazier, the test pilot or the guy in parole,
Right. Or Robbie.
It's like
or you guys for hiking this god awful long trail, right?
Yeah. Right. It's like the yin and right. So like the test pilots were like, the spermatozoidal shape of the yin, and Robbie was the yang, and Dylan and I were the 2 dots in the middle of both of those. It was just all one holistic, circle of eccentricity. Right.
That's awesome.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Hitchhiking.
That's great. I mean, I love the story just for the element of the youthful element in the beginning and wanting to do this thing, it's stuff that I would have done, but I didn't do it when I was that age. And I think it's really important to do those kind of things, especially when you're young and you don't have responsibilities and obligations and a family or married or what have you. It's one of those things that's easy to do, and it teaches you a lot about yourself and the world. Those experiences that you had, and in those 3 months or whatever that you were hiking the first time around, and probably even the second time around, but it's a whole different perspective, whole different ball of wax. they teach you a whole heck of a lot, you know?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, the first time we were very conscious of it essentially being like the rite of passage that was missing in our society, right? So like the rite of passage for like a middle American kind of middle class youth, you know, which we both were, is kind of like go live in the dorms, you know, or like it's kind of important, but it's somewhat unfulfilling if you're like an adventurous type, right? And we really wanted kind of more out of life than that, you know. And in fact, Dylan, you know, he even dropped out of college, and you know, so the kind of prescribed formula for how to transition from being a youth to an adult was not enough. And I think it's not enough for a lot of people. And in fact, you know, in doing this trip and then writing the book, you know, I did a lot of research on rites of passage and how they apply in small scale societies and how they apply in kind of our kind of, you know, meta-modern or postmodern kind of dispersed culture. And you're right, Todd, you know, a lot of people do those things or have those desires. So it's called, you know, it's like one term I heard for it is like modern day drifter tourism, which is you're not a hobo, but you do spend a summer riding trains, you know, and that kind of sticks with you your whole life. And it can be as complex as like hiking the PCT, and it can be as simple, like say someone who has led a more sheltered life than say I did. It might just simply be going on a 2-week road trip without a map. And it's like a necessary counterpart to the prescribed things that you do, you know? So like in smaller scale or indigenous societies, the rites of passage were typically more condensed. You know, the Aboriginal cultures of the South Pacific and Australia, and they do walkabouts that can be for months, but oftentimes it's like a 2 or 3 week thing. You do the same, everyone does more or less the same thing. You have some sort of vision or experience, you come back, you recount what that vision or experience is, and then that prescribes your role in that society going forward. You know, sometimes it's what job you have, how you fit in with the rest of the culture. And, you know, for kind of middle American culture and society, we don't have that imperative. You don't really have to do anything, but you're kind of expected to make your own way. It's a very like individualistic culture, right? So people invent their own rites of passage, but there's no consensus on what any of it means, you know? So you come back from it and you have your stories, but there's no one to sit around the campfire with you and tell you and help you interpret what happened. So you're also left to kind of like make your own mythology about yourself and about what it did to you and what it meant to you, which is liberating, but it's also kind of metaphysically or spiritually hollow, you know, because you don't really, sometimes it takes you decades to figure out what you were looking for back then, you know. And then in 2019, I think it kind of functioned the same way. It made me much more comfortable with the idea of growing old than I had been prior, you know, because mid-40s is, well, the three of us, right? That's young, right? I mean, you're still like, I mean, people will say you're always like 22 in your mind, which I dispute. I think you're always like 35 in your mind.
Yeah.
You know, because once you get into like marriage, career, property, stuff like that, that sticks for a long time, you know, and that's how you feel inside. Your body gets old. And then you start to see the signs of it, you know, your hair goes gray, you know, men start to lose their hair, wrinkles, and you're like, oh shit, you know, I really am getting old. And you have this kind of trepidation about it. But going out and walking like the 900 miles on 46-year-old skateboard abused knees, you know, out there, we were in 2019, we were the old people to the young people, but to the old people, the retirees, we were the young people in their group. Like
Yeah.
we were their peers, but we were like, they were like the seniors and we were like the freshmen, you know. It's like, okay, these are our people now, you know, but we're the young people in this group. and, they would relate to us and talk to us in a way that the true young people didn't, And so that was kind of cool, because you see these people like, we met this guy, Klaus, who was fully retired. He was in his late 60s, maybe early 70s, from Germany. And he had never gone backpacking at all until he retired, and he was out there solo in Northern Washington in the rain. And, you think, wow, that's pretty cool. This guy is doing that at that age, that he might have been even 75. And he's just out there jamming out the miles and just not having the time of his life, because, in terms of embracing the suck, boy, were we doing that at that moment in the rain. But yeah, I mean, it's got an important function. I think people who don't do that, people who don't take the effort to do that kind of thing when they're young, they do it at the worst time and in the worst way at some point later. So like the midlife crisis, it's like, if you never get out there and try to find your limit or find yourself or get lost, it's like, you will do it, but it might ruin your marriage. You might lose your house. Your kids might quit talking to you for a decade. You'll do dumb shit, as opposed to like being conscious about it. So I think it's just something I'm definitely an advocate for, going and getting lost, or, metaphysically, metaphorically, not literally. I did get lost once on this last trip. It was terrifying. So don't go literally get lost.
That is a terrifying moment for anyone that has never been like truly lost. That oh shit moment. That
Yeah, it's anxiety inducing for sure. Yeah.
You're right. I think my rite of passage, I think I know when Todd's was too, but my rite of passage is a little bit more traditional in the sense that I was in the Marine Corps, and that 11 weeks was literally a rite of passage. I physically changed and mentally changed in 11 weeks. Oh, yeah. And so it was definitely a rite of passage. And then Todd, you traveled Europe. You backpacked Europe.
I mean, that would have been my thing for 2.5 months, a couple guys. I was working. I'd already decided that college wasn't my bag at the time. And I was more interested in being outdoors, rock climbing and camping and, going on little trips and that sort of thing. And had a couple buddies that called me up out of the blue that I knew from Alaska. I was living in Colorado at the time, said, "Hey, we're going to Europe. You want to go with us?" I'm like, yeah, I hate my job and I have a bunch of money and was saving up. And what better way to like blow it than to Europe with two friends for, a few months and ride the trains and camp out and backpack around. So.
Yeah, for sure. That's, I think those are like the formative experiences that kind of make you who you are, even if later on it's not who you are, like Wes, you're not, you don't strike me as someone with like the military mentality on a day-to-day basis. Right. Yeah, but you wouldn't be who you are if you hadn't had that experience.
Right. It's a cumulative thing. And, and then I went to college, and that was a transition, probably on a social level, as far as my political thought and who I turned out to be, I think, as a man. I totally changed my, my viewpoint from a very right, well, I won't say very right wing, but from a conservative point of view to a more social liberal. There's no doubt that I would lean more to the left. Of course, my dad has told me that many times.
Yeah. You got that good old fashioned academic left wing indoctrination.
Yeah. At 29. So yeah, exactly. Yeah. So how do you think doing the Pacific Crest Trail in your 20s, how did that impact your 40s and 30s?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's so much doing it. I think doing it was a profound experience, but the need to do it again in 23 years really, I think, shaped my life in a lot of ways. I don't know per se if I'm someone who would have kind of settled into some the suburban lifestyle with kids. Probably not, but I consciously avoided that. because I knew I needed to go take another 6 months off and go hiking in, however many, 23 years. I mean, there were times in my 30s too, when I was just in a really bad place, had really bad depression, had like substance abuse issues. And there were a couple times I might've just stepped in front of a bus, but I was like, I can't do that because, I made this agreement. And so I think it kind of helped me sometimes. It was always like this North Star to focus on, in bad times, because, the seeds of that kind of going astray, were always with me, even when I was young. And Dylan, was someone who understood that and maybe had some of that himself, because we were outsiders, we were like weirdo kids. And that's something that bonded us together. And being a weirdo and kind of staying a weirdo into your adulthood is really challenging. It's like, I attribute it to, it's like being an artist is part of it. Being a musician is part of it. Riding a skateboard was part of it. Every time I think about someone I know who's like so outside the norms of society that, that only someone who has a very high weirdo tolerance like myself even knows them. It always could be traced back. It's like they're always someone I was in a band with, someone I used to skateboard with, another artist in town. I know, I think all those things kind of come from the same place. It's like you have some creativity, a very individualistic spirit, but you're also kind of maybe antisocial or maybe a little angry. Or have something in your formative past that makes you want to express yourself in an aggressive way. And I think that's maybe more common with young men than women, but it's certainly not exclusive to men, but the anger part, maybe. A lot of young men I knew at the time were kind of in that vein, punks, like artists. And just kind of having that mentality into adulthood, they don't directly ask you, but the implicit, when are you going to grow up type of thing. It's like, man, have you ever seen William S. Burroughs? We don't grow up is a misnomer. It's like, I'm never not going to be who I am. I'm never not going to be a weirdo in the eyes of society. But I think that there's a time when you stick to that mentality and you get into maybe your 30s. I don't know when it hits for everybody, but I think it can be rough, because people don't get you. And you do get into a phase of life where you do embrace a little bit more normality, like buying a house, getting married. But oftentimes the thing that you're best at, whether it's like playing the drums or painting or doing conceptual art, or it doesn't have a lot of value. Like there's no career in it. It's like a perpetual hobby, but like you could be as good or better at it than anybody else. You could have recognition for it. Like you could play shows or get shows, get art shows, but there's no living to be made. And you haven't figured out yet how to navigate that. You might be doing art adjacent things. Like I was working in printing, so it's like I was using my art skills, and I'd get work in a show like once a year. I'd get interviewed by a magazine, but there's like no living to be had in it. And it's frustrating, and it could get kind of like dour. And like also a lot of those people, myself included, you spend a lot of your time in 20s like partying. That kind of goes with the territory of being an artist. And man, if you don't stop and you hit that kind of space in your life where you're like, what am I doing? What am I doing this for? No one cares. And then you're also kind of like quote unquote partying, but the party is like you by yourself on your couch. That can get kind of dark.
Yeah.
So I think for me, just having this thing to kind of like latch onto and be like, I need to stay sane. I need to stay healthy, and I need to stay untied down to the extent that I can go back to this project. To me, it was within the scope of being part of my art practice, because as an artist, it's like how I see the world. I'm not going to devote 6 months to something that doesn't have an art component, like I'm going to figure out how to make art within that context, because to me, art is very intertwined with the lived experience. All my art is like oriented around documenting the lived experience, and in a way that is a little, it's not passive. It's not like Ken Burns, where you're taking the existing experience and pulling a narrative out of it. I'm interjecting myself into it, kind of creating a narrative. So as opposed to Ken Burns, it's more like Hunter S. Thompson. You're not being a journalist in a traditional sense. You're creating the story as much as covering the story. So figuring out ways to create a narrative that is compelling, but isn't passive. That it's not something that would have just happened by itself. It only happens because you interject yourself into it. So
because of the intention, right?
Yeah, the intention, having an intention. Yeah, and so I always saw this as kind of like an important life's work, primarily because of the amount of time that would transpire in between the two things. And so it kept me being an artist also, because there were times when I was just ready to bag it, give up on it. But I was like, well, still got this thing to do. So, how it affected me, I think it cemented, I think doing this hike in 1996 and the two kind of art projects I did along the way, it cemented my belief in my true nature, which is being a contrarian and being outside of the mainstream of society. And I felt okay with that. Not only okay with it, I felt it was like a mission, it's like a calling. It's like something that you must do, not something that you want to do even. So it made me more comfortable with that. And then the need to do it again kept me on the rails, so to speak. Many junctures in my life when I could have gone off the rails.
Do you equate it at all with like what Joseph Campbell talked when he talked about the hero's journey? Does it have that kind of impact?
Yeah. In fact, when Dylan's mom is an author, right? She's a published author, and she's really widely read. And when we finished the 1996 trip, she's like, "Oh, you should read this book because it's like what you're doing." And it's the kind of thing where you read it and you're like, "Oh shit." It's like, I guess this wasn't an original thought, and there's a lot of, valid critique of like Joseph Campbell through a couple lenses. One is postmodernism, because that whole idea is a very modernist construct that everybody has this template, right? That's essentially erasing cultural differences, right? Because it's saying like that there's this innate kind of like quest that we're all going on in our minds and our bodies that map onto these kind of three stages primarily. And it's kind of erasing the differences in the way that like 19th and early 20th century anthropologists would kind of look for commonalities among very diverse cultures. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, the more contemporary critique would be like cultural appropriation by saying like, my experience is exactly the same as like an Aboriginal Australian's experience. But I think the pushback on those critiques is that they're based on a physical and cultural world. But if you start thinking about a metaphysical or spiritual world, then, and not even in a religious sense, maybe in a Jungian sense, because a lot of Joseph Campbell stuff comes from like Carl Jung.
Yeah.
Then you just have to kind of figure out where the line is for you. How much do you believe in a kind of like common consciousness? How much do you believe in like a shared mythology? How much do and I think a lot of people who are more of the postmodern or like I call it metamodern current age people, they don't have any stock in that kind of stuff. That's a very antiquated way to look at the world through the lens of like metaphysical or spiritual or magical thinking. I think it's kind of coming back. Heather, who was on the podcast last time, she's doing her thesis, not entirely. I mean, it's not formulated yet, but she's very interested in magical thinking in the arts and like metaphysical, spiritual or magic. And it's maybe coming back a little bit. That Iman or Gairon, show at the Museum of Contemporary Art Denver. When you look at that stuff, it has a very strong like metaphysical, like energy to it, and that's contemporary art. So I think it's like maybe coming back a little bit. I mean, I'm not a practicing spiritualist. I'm not, I don't navigate with any kind of the world typically through any kind of metaphysical thinking. But when you go out and like live in nature for a long time and you do something super repetitive, like walking, and I would meditate also, hiking. It's a way to pass the day, do like walking meditations. You start to get pretty out there, like some of that stuff seems to be a lot more relevant to your day-to-day life than it does just like grinding out your job in the city. And as I mentioned, at the top end, I did have like a pretty profound, both Dylan and I had a pretty profound metaphysical experience that kind of kicked off the desire to do the trip anyway. So going back to the hiking, it kind of like puts you in that headspace. So yes, 100% to the Joseph Campbell stuff. I mean, I think it's kind of undeniable its relevance to the desire to go on like an epic journey. But I think it's important to kind of like pick it apart a little bit too, or be a little, you can't, like, I don't want that to be my religion,
Right.
And that's also, it's been politicized. Like, it's kind of an obscure reference, but like the Promise Keepers, which was a big evangelical movement in the 90s, they were super into Joseph Campbell because it's also a very masculine perspective. Like Joseph Campbell, it's like very, very masculine, male oriented. But I think, Joseph Campbell's onto something with saying that there's this recurring pattern again and again through all of human history of people wanting to go on this journey of discovery where they leave their quote unquote, their village. They step outside of the gate of their town. They go out into a neutral territory. They get lost. They discover themselves. They have a vision. They learn something about themselves. Then they come back, and then they either have that interpreted for them or they interpret it to their family, their friends, their village. And that is important in formulating their identity going into adulthood. Right? And I think it's so common that you can't deny it. And I think everyone, whether they're conscious of it or not, has kind of a desire to go out and do that. And or do it vicariously. I mean, the most famous example of how Joseph Campbell's work has been adapted into our culture is the Star Wars trilogy. Like George Lucas read Hero of a Thousand Faces and then sat down and wrote Star Wars, the Star Wars series. Just like, let's map this onto this. And boy, howdy, do people like that kind of story,
Yeah, I keep coming back to Joseph Campbell throughout my life. Mm-hmm. I watched The Power of Myth, which was, in the 90s or maybe late 80s. And I keep coming. In fact, I was just listening to him last night, which is just kind of, coincidental.
Well, synchronicity. That's part of the metaphysical thinking. Yeah. I would say that's not a coincidence.
Right.
It's synchronicity. Yeah.
Yeah. So I keep coming back to him, and it brings me a lot of solace in a sense that we have this unique experience, and it's not just this whole, being raised as a Christian environment, that it's not just that there's links through all cultures that, that we have this shared metaphysical experience. And I find peace in it,
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But, I have friends who are very versed in that stuff, have watched all that stuff, read all those books, and they're adamantly opposed to the very notion, so I think I'm kind of more on your side, but I think it's a controversial idea, and it's predicated on you letting go of your specific nurture and even nature to some extent, and be like, well, maybe there's a third leg on this stool, and it's something like primordial. I mean, my joke is it's the 3% of our DNA we got from the extraterrestrials that make us different than the chimps. It's something. There's something going on with us people that's a little different, right? We're thinking about like what happens when we die. And I love my dog. I don't think she's thinking about that.
Yeah.
So like or she's either not thinking about that or she already knows it. But we're in this space where we don't know and we want to know. Right.
Yeah.
But I think this topically is a good segue to the origin story of this project, which I mentioned, and like Wes said, you wrote down. So when we were living in the woods, when we were 18, Dylan might have been 19, working as condo cleaners. Towards the end of the summer, things were kind of coming to a close, and our friends rolled through town. We had these friends from Wyoming that came to visit, and they left us a one single mushroom, psychedelic mushroom, just one, right? And neither one of us really. I think Dylan probably had taken some acid or mushrooms before. I had maybe smoked a little weed, maybe took acid once, but not a drug person. Neither one of us were. And we decided to split it, one afternoon, because I think the condo cleaning was like a bust for the day, like it was starting, the shoulder season was starting. There's no condos to clean. Well, here, you take the cap and I'll take the stem, and for people who take mushrooms like that, or even if you don't, it's probably important to say it's like, that's very little, it's like not much at all. It's not smoking the whole joint. It's like taking the half toke on one, but I had never done it mushrooms before. I don't know about Dylan. Anyway, we took the mushrooms. We're goofing around. We're starting to feel it a little bit. And we're like at our friend's house, and we went to the skate park. Like nothing seemed fun. It was all too we had this kind of manic energy that transcended the normal things we would do. And so we're at my friend's house in her front lawn, and across the street is the Grovont Butte, which the town of Jackson Hole kind of wraps around Grovont Butte. And we're like, let's just climb up to the top of that. So we're like, sweet. So we start climbing, not on a trail or anything. We're just scrambling straight up the side of this steep butte. And then it's, the physical activity, it just really starts hitting hard. And we're about halfway up the butte. And Dylan's like, I want to see those aspen trees like way over there. I was like, yeah. He's like, that's where I want to go. I want to go over there. I was like, cool. Well, I want to go over here. So see ya. And he just left that direction. I climbed to the top of the butte and walked out to the point, kind of the edge of the butte, where you can kind of see the Grand Tetons. You can see up the valley where the Snake River is towards like the Hoback Junction, Wyoming. Right beneath your feet is like the town of Jackson Hole. To your right is the Teton Elk Refuge. So there's like 3,000 elk in this like big open grass plain. And then north of the elk refuge is Yellowstone. So it's one of the most beautiful places on earth, the top of Grovont Butte. And I'm losing my mind, I'm just really into it. And I sit there and I watch this thunderhead build up, kind of like in the Hoback, which is like 30 miles south Jackson, come rolling up, and you can hear the light, you can see the lightning, and you can hear the thunder, boom. And then the cracks of lightning, boom. And you're watching it come, and how you can see rain, off in the distance, like in the west, it's raining over there. You can see it. And I'm watching it like I'm watching an episode of Friends. It's just like, it's keeping me so entertained. Every time the lightning would go, it's like the laugh track kicks in, it's like, oh, whoa, look at that. And then it gets close enough. It starts raining, pelting rain on me. And then it gets close enough that I'm like, I'm sitting on the edge of this butte. There's no trees. I'm on the very precipice of this thing. And this lightning storm's coming. This is not a good scene. And, being someone who grew up in the outdoors, it's like you're supposed to like lay down, like make yourself flat, right? Because anything sticking its head up is going to get zapped. And now the lightning's like, I'm having those instantaneous like light flashes and sound. And I don't know if you've ever been that close to lightning, but the sound is incredible. It is like, you feel it like the ground rumbles. I've been in earthquakes. It feels like that. You could just feel it in your chest. It's almost like you don't hear it. It's like a physical sound, right? And the light is like, everything is blinding white light, So I'm laying flat, and I start just thinking, what's better than laying flat on the ground? Being in the ground. So I start digging out like with my hands, and it's muddy, and I'm just digging a pit for myself, and then I start covering myself with mud. So I've just got like my face peeking out. I'm covered in mud. I'm just still wearing my clothes, And man, lightning, I don't know how close this lightning hit, but it was the most intense kind of like electrical auditory phenomena like I've ever experienced. I mean, it was like where all your hair stands up, and the rocks crackle. I don't know if you've ever been somewhere where rocks crackling. It's scary, man. Like when lightning is when the area around you is so electrified, and it's like, whoa, bam, it's like getting, it probably feels like what it feels like to get hit with like a, 50 caliber round, like 10 feet away from you, where it's like your ears are ringing and it's bright white light, really super intense. And then it kind of like dissipates a little bit, moves on. I sit up, I'm just totally covered in mud, and the thunderstorm rolls up towards Yellowstone, and then the sun sets, over the Tetons. It's just like awe-inspiring. But that whole time, kind of after the thunderstorm, I sat up and I'm kind of feeling the buzz from it. And that feeling you have when someone's standing right behind you, like someone's right fucking behind me. I had that feeling to the power of like 1,000. And it was a terrifying feeling. And I'm like, something is right behind me. And I don't know what it is, but in my mind, when I pictured it, it was kind of like a really psycho, giant, gnarled version of like, what's his name from Gonzo from the Muppets, like the blue beaked, right? That type of thing. This is what I'm picturing in my mind, but I have no idea. And I'm like, it's not terrestrial, whatever it is. Rode in on the storm. And I'm like, it's here because I'm here, and it's not going to harm me, because if it harms me, its portal into this place is closed. I'm its permission to be here. But whatever you do not fucking turn around and look at it. Just be with it. Just sit here. And it was there for a long time, in my mind. And then like, as the sun set and it got dark, it kind of like, it went away. And then I sit up and I'm like, okay, that was freaky. And I bailed down off the butte, and I'm getting closer to town. And I walk across this road, hop over a fence. I'm like making a beeline towards town for some reason. I feel like I want to go into town, covered in mud, mind you. And I hop this fence because I'm going straight into town. Like I'm not on the road. I'm like going as the crow flies. So I'm just hopping fences. Hop this fence. I'm walking through this pasture, and there's this like white horse standing in this pasture, and it's just like flipping its tail. And the horse just kind of looks at me, and I feel all this energy inside me, all this tension just drain from my body. So much that I wet my pants. I just stood there pissing my pants. And I just kind of didn't physically collapse, but I just kind of like, it was ultimate kind of like letting go of whatever it was that I had been experiencing. Wild feeling. And then I went into town, and I'm just covered in mud, walking around with my pants all pissed. And these people are like, hey, will you take a picture of us in front of the Antler Bridge? And I'm like, sure. And I'm like, hope you have a lovely time here in Wyoming, So anyway, I'm like, I'm walking back. I figure, well, I'll go back to my friend's house. And I'm walking up the road. Kind of, my friend lived a little bit out of town. I'm walking up the road. It's dark. I'm not around houses really. And Dylan just comes crashing out of these bushes. Like he had just plowed right through them, stumbles down onto the road, and he sees me, and he's kind of like, oh, hey. I'm like, hey, what's up? Of course we meet in this place. What have you been up to? And he's like, well, I went up to the top of the butte, and I started going further and further back into the woods. And it started to get dusk, and coyotes are just going bonkers, just and he's like, but I could hear the pattern that they were using to communicate with each other. and I could hear that they were going down a line. And, one of them was pretty close to me, but then there was another one, like maybe, who knows, a mile further. And then there was a couple more going in the other direction. And the next time the yelping came down the line, it came to me, I did it too. And as soon as I did it, we all started to run into the woods. And I started running, and they would yelp down the line. And when it got to me, I would yelp, and then it would go up the line and back down to me, and I would yelp, and I'd go down the line. And he's like, and I ran probably about 7 miles back into the woods with these coyotes, which is a wild, that's a wild experience too, man. So, when people in today's context are like, unless you were a member of these specific Ogallala tribes, you do not have, and you cannot say you have an animal totem. That's cultural appropriation, right? And I think that's a valid statement. It's a valid critique of people casually saying they have an animal totem. But how do you tell Dylan he doesn't have a coyote animal totem after that experience, like running with coyotes on mushrooms in the woods, that's something that sticks with you, it's a profound experience, right? So after the PCT and reading, the Joseph Campbell book, I started reading all kinds of anything I could find, about rites of passage or, just kind of voraciously consuming stuff. I read this book called it's an autobiography. It's called Lame Deer Secret Visions. So it's about this really entertaining, hilarious guy from the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. And it's just his memoir, but he tells a story about in this, I think it was written in the 60s, and he maybe was in his 60s. So he's of a generation that a little bit transcends the kind of like pre-industrial culture of the Lakota into like the kind of post-industrial culture. And he's talking about his own rite of passage as a youth. And it was, and I'm paraphrasing here, so kind of forgive me for glossing details and just kind of telling a story. But what he was supposed to do is go out on a vision quest, which is essentially like fasting, go get lost, go hike around for several days, find like a prominent point on a hill, dig a pit to lie in this pit until you have vision, come back, tell everybody what it was all about. And they'll tell you like what it means, what it prescribes for you for the rest of your life. And he was kind of a prankster. He was a goofy guy. He was like a contrarian, funny kid, So in this book, he says, I was really terrified that I would be visited by the Wakanyan, which is the thunderbird. And if you're on this vision quest and lightning hits your hill, or you're visited by the thunderbird, then you're a heyoka. A heyoka is the translation would be like a backwards man. You do everything wrong. You ride your horse backwards. You set up your sweat lodge the wrong direction. You do everything that you're not supposed to do. And that's a pretty common role in a lot of small scale societies. There's one person designated to do everything wrong. So they're like a clown, right? Sacred clown. And that's so everyone can be remembered what's right. If you don't have an example of what's wrong, you don't know what's right. So you need this perpetual reminder or reinforcement of what's wrong. But of course, me reading that, I'm like, what the bleep? Mm-hmm. Because what he's describing, what he doesn't want to happen is what did happen to me, So I'm like, I had that experience. I'm probably mapping my experience onto this other experience from a culture that I don't belong to. But, at the time when I read this, when I was like 24, 25, kind of fresh off this experience of the PCT and being grounded in this experience of like this trip where I was, lightning definitely hit my hill, and well before any of this kind of current cultural critique of appropriation kind of entered like the kind of discourse, I'm like, well, that's me. Like fucking A, that's exactly what happened to me. And it, instead of, in his case, he didn't want that to be him, and it didn't end up being him. He had a different vision, and that meant he was going to be a healer, and that's what he really wanted to be, But to me, I'm like, okay, well, I am the way I am because I must be that way. It's almost like a metaphysical calling. And so I embraced it wholeheartedly, and not without issues. It like caused me a lot of challenges, I think, being a young adult and being like, well, I'm the way I am because of all, people are just like, get the fuck out of here. Like, so it's a hard thing to kind of explain. Right. But, I started reading up on not just heyokas, but any kind of like, any person that's in that role in society. And it's supposed to be really tough. It's supposed to be one of the hardest things to take on, and so I was like, okay, I was like ready for it, and so that's one of the reasons I kept up on my weird art practice too, because I'm like, this is the vehicle for it,
Right.
Yeah. So making like heavily conceptual kind of humor-based art that is kind of infused with the lived experience. It's like, oh, well, it makes sense. Like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And then another thing, get this, I had this dream on the PCT in 1996 that was really profound, and it stuck with me like glue. Like I remembered every detail of this dream. And it was like, Dylan and I were in this big cathedral. There's like mass going on, and I'm sitting at the back, and he's somewhere out in the crowd. And they're passing around this box of like odds and ends, like clothing, donation stuff. And inside this box is a inflatable rubber duck. Okay. And I pick it up and I'm like, this duck was like just emanating energy to me. Right. And it was a yellow duck, and it had a red t-shirt with a lightning bolt on it, and I'm like, this fucking duck is amazing. So I got this duck, and then another box comes around a little bit later, and there are these black, like little black patent leather ducky boots with wings on them. And I'm like, these are the duck's boots. And I put the boots on the duck, and I start pumping it with my hands. It starts going, and Dylan stands up in the middle of the thing, and he's like, the ducky's got the boots. Just like rage yelling, the ducky has the boots. This thing's just like on fire. Just, and then that's like when you wake up or whatever, just like, what the fuck was that all about? But then, it's like the bird, the lightning, the winged shoes. That's, Hermes, Hermes is the fashion brand. Hermes, same reference point, the messenger, right? So it's like my other thing, my two things are my three things: being a weirdo, being an artist, being like a storyteller, and it's like, man, that's all right there. And it's like, I probably picked up a little bit of that in school. Like I probably innately knew some of that symbolism, but I didn't know what those things meant. I found out later, and each time it's just like, holy shit, that's wild. That symbolism you have in your dream is so mapped onto my lived experience. It's like when you get a really good tarot reading, or you get an astrological reading from someone who really knows what they're doing and studying a long time. It's a little esoteric, but you're like that. It can be creepy how accurately it's describing you,
Right.
So, I mean, that to me, it just sealed the deal. I'm like, okay, that's who I am. That's what I'm about.
And I think for listeners that want an idea of the contrarian, and this is talking about appropriation, cultural appropriation, but if you ever see the movie Little Big Man with Dustin Hoffman, there's a contrarian in that. And I think they do a pretty good job of representation of what that is. But that's.
But boy, would they cancel his ass today?
Oh my God, yeah,
probably rightly so.
Yeah,
with that movie,
and maybe he'll get canceled now that it's been on the podcast. Like, I'm going to go watch it. Yeah, I'm going to cancel his ass.
But that role exists.
Yes,
all over the place, and it exists in contemporary, the Jackass movie franchise. Like, just take that. Like Steve-O. Steve-O. He's a backwards man, so even something as simple as that, so Victor Turner, the kind of really famous anthropologist, the quote that I have in my book is like, a normal man acts abnormally, not out of disobedience to tribal tradition, but because of it. Right. So it's this idea of like having an outsider is necessary. You must have outsiders to have social cohesion. Social cohesion doesn't work without an example of what is not conducive to social cohesion. You must have those things together. So when you get your whole culture baked down to like 35 people, one person's just really going to stand out, and it's sanctioned, and it's not just sanctioned, it's prescribed. It's like if Lame Deer in that anecdote, if he would have had my experience and came back, they would be like, yeah, we know you don't want to do this, but too bad.
Yeah.
Because we need someone to do it. And you just had the experience. So you must do it, So, I think that's all interesting. And it's really been interesting to kind of navigate today as like a art academic, and to write this book, to kind of navigate that experience through my current perspective and be like, there is something kind of metaphysical to this, because I had these experiences without knowing what they were and kind of found out later. And the most convenient examples are from small scale societies, which tend to be indigenous. And I'm not interested in like appropriating their culture. I'm not Lakota. I don't want to be a Heyoka, but there's a parallel that's kind of undeniable. So like, how do you kind of like acknowledge that you're not part of that culture, but you understand that experience? And really the only way to kind of square those things is like, well, there's got to be something a priori to either culture,
right?
Which is like where the Joseph Campbell kind of mythology or the Jungian common consciousness stuff resonates, right?
Yeah. And I think, like what you're experiencing is just like what you said. You're not wanting to be Lakota. You're not claiming that the experience was a Lakota based experience.
Right.
You've had an experience as, like you said, parallel to what many cultures do. So yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And just sought out some context for it. I think a lot of people have like very formative experiences, like, like you, Todd, like backpacking across Europe. I'm sure that you had profound experiences or the aggregate of the experience was profound. And you have to make meaning out of it. Like we don't have the counsel to tell us like, here's what you experienced and here's what it means. Right.
Yeah.
Which is very liberating, honestly, that we get to make our own mythologies. Like that's really cool and really honors the individual, but it's also hard to navigate. You can really get lost trying to find out what your formative experiences were guiding you towards. Yeah. And so, just to kind of circle all the way back around, the show at Dateline and the books in the show do go into all this stuff. Like I'm sure, Todd, when you notice like, oh, I'm going to see Pete's show and he's got these books and it's about, his backpacking trip. And I'm sure you saw some pictures on my Instagram of like some of the photography from the trip and stuff. And then you're like, you're in a certain frame of mind and you get there and I've got that briefcase full of human hair, and you're like, what the fuck is that?
New Magazine is our media sponsor for the Tenet podcast. That's NUE. You can follow both the national and the Denver edition of New Magazine on Instagram. The national edition can be found at new_magazine and the Denver edition at new_Denver_magazine. Look to New for compelling stories from the world of art and fashion. Thanks for listening.
This is Peter Miles Bergman, and you're listening to the Tenet podcast.
Peter, so lay out for us. Obviously, this was, you had the forethought before you went on this incredible journey hiking the trail. You already knew that you wanted to do this art project. So talk about the thought behind what you did during this trip as far as the art related portion of it.
Sure.
And give us a little background context on the thought that brought you to thinking out what you're going to do on this trip.
Sure. Yeah. So a little bit of background can help. So, I just graduated from college, but my university experience was, I've now learned, very atypical art perspective. So the person who was the department head of my department when I was an undergrad was Allan Kaprow. And Allan Kaprow, his Wikipedia is, he coined the term happenings. And he was an early performance artist and a theorist. And his whole bent was like the fusion of art and everyday life. he's the theorist who kind of pointed out that what Jackson Pollock was doing was turning art from a craft that produced objects into a documentary process that captured a gesture, and specifically said the movement away from like object commodity in art to like action and gesture has the potential to bring magic and ritual back into art that's been missing for hundreds of years, but initially was fused 100% with art, right? And that permeated my whole education. So the people we learned about, we learned about traditional artists, but we also learned about Joseph Beuys and his whole kind of shamanic practice. Learned about like Chris Burden, who, the kind of endurance-oriented performance artist. He spent 30 days in a bed, without talking to anyone in a gallery. He spent 30 days up on an elevated platform with only a 3-gallon bottle of water and an empty bottle to relieve himself in. 30 days. No, he's up in the corner of a gallery for 30 days. You couldn't see him, not making a sound, no food. So people going for these kind of like super intense transcendent experiences, but also a lot of artists that would deploy walking. So like Richard Long is a British artist who uses walking as a generative practice. So he has like a piece called 1,000 Miles, 1,000 Hours, a clockwise walk across England. And it's like a drawing of a square spiral. Or Stanley Bruin, who walked from Holland to North Africa and just documented just numerically the steps that he would take with no other information or context. Or Marina Abramovic and Ule, who walked, well, this is kind of a good enough story to give it a minute. They wanted to, they were a partnership, romantic and working partnership. And they had this idea to do a piece where they walked towards each other from opposite ends of the Great Wall of China. And then when they meet in the middle, they were going to marry. But it took 10 years to get the permits lined up from the People's Republic of China. And by the time they got the permits, they were barely on speaking terms. They had broken up, they didn't work together. And they thought, this is too important to not do it. So they called the piece The Lovers. They started off at opposite ends. Marina started at the ocean and Ule started in Inner Mongolia. And they walked towards each other, but instead of marrying, they embraced each other and never talked to each other again. And in fact, didn't see each other again ever until recently. Marina Abramovic, as part of her retrospective at the MoMA, recreated a piece called Night Sea Crossing, where her and Ule would sit at a table and stare at each other for 13 hours. So she did it. It was a little schmaltzy. So they had and I'm sure you've seen videos of it, where she's just sitting in a red dress at a table and people could sit down and stare at her, and lo and behold, who shows up but Ule? There's a great video you can YouTube. And he's this 80-year-old hipster guy, wearing tight pants and cons, just kind of floating through the crowd. And they probably hadn't seen each other in decades. And he just waits his turn and walks up and sits down across from her. And you can just see it just melts her, and they don't say anything to each other. He just sits there for everyone was allowed 3 minutes or whatever. And he just stares at her and then gets up and bails, but a great saga. So all that stuff was in the air. So I'm I'm going on this long walk. I need to figure out some way to kind of make it a performance. And, because I was so consciously oriented around it being a rite of passage, I thought maybe there's some sartorial expression or the way you present yourself in everyday life that you could invert. I'm graduating from college. So what I should be doing, according to my culture, is I should go get a job at a bank, and show up every day in a suit and tie and just do that thing. But that's not me. And I'm not doing that. I need to kind of subvert that. But I did have this cheap suit that my mom had bought me at CNR when my sister got married. And when we were buying the suit, I've got this asymmetric haircut and I'm wearing cutoffs and combat boots and stuff. And I'm with my mom, and she's buying me this, probably I was in college, so I was probably like 21. And he's asking me all these questions like about the fashion of suits. And I'm like, man, I don't, do you want them cuffed or not? It's like, I don't, whatever. It's a $200 suit. And he just kind of sized me up. He's like, so basically, you're going to get the suit to go to your sister's wedding, and then you're probably going to wear it to some job interviews, and you're going to wear it when you get married. You're probably going to be buried in it. This is going to be the only suit you ever own. And my mom and I just go, we laugh because we're just like, yeah, basically that's what we want. He's like, okay, cool. Got it. Now that I know what you're looking for, I get you the right thing. So I get this like cheap ass black pinstripe suit. And I was like, maybe I should just, on the day that I should be sitting in the graduation ceremony, instead, I'm going to already be like, 600 miles out on the trail. I should just wear this suit out on the trail, but I should just keep wearing it every day for the rest of my life. So it's going to get just shredded, ripped up. I should not wash it ever. That should be my suit, because like Joseph Beuys, he always wore the same suit every day. It's like the suit made out of felt. And I thought that was cool. Like when I found out about that, I'm like, that's a cool move. Like just to have this kind of uniform that has this meaning for him. The felt had like this metaphysical meaning. So I was like, I'm going to steal that, and I'm going to shred this suit, and I'm just going to wear it forever and just see how it affects my life, because I was so antisocial at that time that I wanted some like outward symbol of that, so it's like, from the moment you step on the bus, everyone's just like, the type of thing where the bus is full, but people will stand instead of sit next to you. That's what I'm going for. Right. So I had the suit all packed up. I had it planned to like send it to Tuolumne Meadows, because that was like timed right with when the graduation ceremony would have been, because, I finished school in fall. I would have sat for my graduation ceremony in like May. Right. But at that point, I was already a month out on the trail. And, speaking of synchronicity, Wes, when we stayed with my mom for a week in Ridgecrest, California, which is not too far off the trail, just Ridgecrest is right where the Mojave meets the Sierras. And my mom, for some weird reason, I definitely didn't tell my mom this, because my mom would have been like, your $200 suit, I spent good, but my mom had set out my high school cap and gown, which I also didn't use because I also ditched out on my high school graduation ceremony.
That's what your dad said. You graduated on the river because you were on a rafting trip.
That's right. I was in the middle of the Grand Canyon. In fact, I have a master's degree. I've never been to a graduation ceremony of my own. I went to my sister's high school graduation. That's the only graduation ceremony I've ever been to. So I was like, that's weird. Why is that out? I was like, Mom, why did you set up my cap and gown? She's like, I don't know. I found it in the closet the other day. I thought maybe you'd want it or could use it for something. And so I packed it, because I'm like, cool. That's like, I'm going to do a whole day in that on the day, and then I'll put on this suit, So that was like idea number one. And then it's like, how do you document it? I was journaling, I was taking photos, and that's a little bit of like, just, for posterity, for my own sake. And then to kind of get some art, like figure out what to do with it later. I kind of had this nascent idea of doing a book. Well, I know I had that idea because I was shooting black and white, because at the time in the 90s, it's way cheaper to print in black and white than in color. So I was even thinking that far ahead in terms of like a written book. But then I thought about doing an animation, and I kind of worked it out with Dylan. So we had this disposable panoramic 35 millimeter film cameras, those plastic ones. In those panoramic cameras, all they were was they cropped off the top and bottom of a 35 millimeter frame, and then they blew it up too big. That's why they always like looked a little grainy. So it wasn't like it wasn't wide angle or like a bigger negative. It was just they just blacked out the top and bottom of the 35 millimeter and then printed them 8 inches wide and cut off the top and bottom. Right. But we figured out like heel to toe, how far away the character would be in the frame. We figured out where in the frame, like the right 20%. And then we figured out like an animation, a clunky animation is about 6 frames a second. So figured out a motion where I was going to like stop, kind of pat my hair down, pose, like you're posing for a picture on a vista. And then I would like bend down and then like toss the cap but it would only be one frame in this like, so it'd be 1/6 of a second. And then I'd be wearing the suit. And then the idea was the suit would just kind of molt off, like the arm would fall off because it just, the wear and tear on gear is incredible, doing something like this. So like a $200 suit from CNR, it's just not going to last, So that was the concept with the animation. Right. And this is like, spoiler alert, like the book is written such that you don't really know this. It's hidden information that's revealed as you get through it. But, hopefully it's a good enough story that even if you hear this part, it's still worth reading. The suit, when we got to Tuolumne Meadows, no package, no suit. It's like, what the, what? And like, I call my girlfriend on the payphone. It's like, no, I mailed it right when you told me to. And I'm like, I was just crushed by that, man. I was just like, this is my whole thing. I walked bleeping 700 miles to get here to put on this stupid bleeping suit, and it was gone, man. And I was just like, I was crestfallen. So we stayed there for like 3 days, hoping it would show up, and it never did. Dylan kind of talked me down, and he's like, there's more to this than that. Like, we don't have time to wait, like we got to stay on schedule. So we kept going. And, as I mentioned in like Bernie Falls, which is, that would be like, I don't know, 400 more miles, after a couple of days, I'm like, whatever, it's cool. Like, we'll still do the animation. I'm still on this epic trip. I'm here with my best friend, like there's a lot to be excited about. When we get to Bernie Falls and he's just like, man, I can't do it. Like my back is killing me. My uncle, doctor said I could do permanent nerve damage to my back. We can't make it in time anyway. So we're like, okay, man, look, we're going to stop. We're going to stop in Oregon, 200 more miles. We get to the very next resupply stop, Old Station. And the Old Station postmaster, we're like, yeah, we're here to pick up. The way this works is you mail yourself boxes, general delivery. That's still how it works, even in 2022. If you resupply yourself, you have someone mail you a box full of your freeze-dried food and whatnot, general delivery. And these post offices in these little towns, they're geared up for it. They'll have a whole extra storage unit. They get so many boxes, right? So you show up, it's like, yeah, Peter Bergman, Dylan Kuhn, we have a hiker box. And the woman's like, Peter Bergman, your package arrived at Tuolumne Meadows. They called up here because we'd been waiting around for so long. And, and they're like, they thought you were further past me. So they've sent it ahead. It's at Castle Crags, which is like another, next stop down the way. And I'm like, man, like talk about a meaningful coincidence. Right after we decide we're done, that's when the thing pops back up. So if you're out there looking for meaning, which of course, obviously I'm doing, and obviously I'm doing to an extreme extent at this point, because I've been living outdoors for like 70 days and like meditating every day. I'm losing my mind out here. And I'm like, what does it mean? And it's like, maybe it means I'm not supposed to be that person. I'm not supposed to be that weirdo who's wearing that suit that no one wants to sit next to on the bus. Maybe I'm supposed to just go normcore and wear this thing to a job interview. Like maybe the universe is trying to tell me something. So we picked it up and did the whole animation. It's in the flip book, or it's at Dateline, projected on the wall on a loop. But, I only wore that suit for like 10 days. It did get a couple big ass rips, but I just sewed it up, like sloppy style. And after I quit hiking, I kind of had a lot of momentum. I had planned to take the whole summer off. Unlike Dylan, I did have enough money, And so I went down to Mexico City on the bus right after, came back. My friend was like, hey, like the Sex Pistols have reunited with like all original members, including the original bass player. And they're going to play one show in North America in Vancouver. Let's drive there. It's like, shit, yeah, let's go. So we drove up to Vancouver from LA. He also had a pony tank of nitrous, which we filled up and sucked down 5 times in 2 weeks. in addition to a lot of other consumables. So we were not in our right minds by any stretch, but I took the suit with me in an ammo box. And I'm like, hey, on the way back, we need to pull off at Ashland, Oregon, right on I-5 and drive about 25 miles up into the Siskiyous. And I'm going to bury this suit at Jackson Gap, which is like where Dylan and I quit hiking. And we did that. We drove up, hiked up to what I thought at the time was the south edge of Jackson Gap, buried the suit, put a waist high cairn of rocks over it, took some pictures, and bailed, And when Dylan and his wife Ann and I in 2019, we drove up to Jackson Gap to start a trip, had a shovel in the truck, climbed up the south side of Jackson Gap on our first morning. There's no cairn of rocks up there, and I'm looking around and I'm looking at the picture and I'm like, I don't see this like black lava stuff anywhere. And I start exploring around, doing some digs. Dylan's like, people take cairns down sometimes when they see them because it's like leave no trace stuff. He's like, that spot right there, it looks like, see how the ground's depressed? It looks like when someone digs a hole and then like the weather sets in, because Dylan's like expert outdoorsman, so he spots these things. Dig there. And so I dig there and I'm digging and I find like a little bit of a piece of plastic bag. I'm like, oh, I got something here. I don't remember a plastic bag, but I got something here. And then of course, what I dig up is a turd, someone's human turd that they had dug a hole for. Found some, what I call, fossilized human remains, right? But nothing, no suit. And then Dylan's like, let me see that picture. And he holds the picture up to the horizon. You can see Mount Shasta from up there, really prominent. And he's like, I don't know where you were when you buried the suit, but you weren't standing right here. He's like, look at this picture. Look at the horizon. He's like, see how Mount Shasta's on the right in the picture and see how it's like on the left in our horizon. It's not the same spot. And I'm like, yeah, all that nitrous. I mean, I don't, there's a bunch of roads up there. I swore I was here. And we even went back. We waited a day. We went back the next day, and we did some. We were like, what's another hill that looks like this hill? And Dylan and Ann were really invested in like, we'll stay as long as we need. And I'm like, I just kind of remembered back to losing it the first time, and I'm like, no, man, that's like, this is what's meant to happen. That's in the past. Like that whole mentality, and like, I mean, and now, as a mid-career artist, I'm like, man, that symbolism is so heavy-handed anyway. I mean, give me a break. Like there's no subtlety to that. That's a junior move. Like I definitely would have dug that shit up because that would have been a great epic story, to like have this time capsule and wear this suit, for 900 miles on the trail. But I'm like, no, man, leave it behind. But I did buy a white nylon mesh, sparkly vaquero shirt to wear with the suit from the Goodwill. And Dylan had gifted Heather and I like a 18-inch long braid of his hair at our wedding as a gift because of my hair collection. And in fact, Anne cut it off his head right while he was giving the toast and telling the awkward story about how I have a human hair collection to my new in-laws. She walked up behind with a butcher knife and just lopped off, almost 2 feet of hair. So Heather had fashioned it into like a necklace. And so it was my tie, it was like a hair tie, and I didn't tell him that I was going to wear that, but I did wear that. I wore that every single day of the 2019 trip. And it's in a like a vitrine light table, at the Dateline show. So, no suit, but we did resume the animation. The animation worked. It's one of those things where you're like, I can't believe this worked. It carries all the way through the 2019 part of the animation. I stand there for a while. I wave a long goodbye. I turn around. I walk off in the distance and off the frame. The last day you can see my foot is the very last day. The very next frame is the northern terminus of the PCT at the Canadian border with nobody standing in front of it, but it's the exact same size and shape as my human body had been all the way through the animation. And it's pretty cool. There's a frame where it jumps forward 11 years and I'm standing in front of an airplane. It's black. That's like another story that's in this zine called Man-Made. And then the next frame. So all this goes by in 1/3 of a second. The next frame is 2019. I'm 23 years older, but it's like a seamless kind of animation. So in terms of the artifact, that's the most successful, thing that came out of it was this animation in an immediate sense, but in a more profound sense, like the memoir and like the 2 trail journals, which are combined in a kind of nonlinear, somewhat graphic designed book, tells the whole story. It's like not just the hike in 1996, but how we got there, who we were, how I got to 2019. Because at some point you're like, what happened, if you're the reader of this book, so, well, what happened in the 23 years, and when I started examining my own life and Dylan's life, it's just kind of like people who don't choose to follow the kind of straight and narrow and what they go through in life, and at some point I'm like, every day hiking, I would remember, I'd meditate and then I would recollect and I would remember my life. And it's like as close to detail as possible. And it's partly just to pass the time, but I'm like, how do you narrativize this? And how do you focus it towards it being appropriate and make sense to bridging these 2 time periods? And I went through some dark shit and I just put it in there, I'm like, I'm just going to like say what happened and say how I felt. And at some point I'm like, God damn it, I'm writing a memoir. Like, how terrible is that? There's like this saying, like, every time a memoirist is born, a family dies, right? Because, it's like all this stuff that nobody wants that story told, but it was very cathartic for me. And I tried to keep it entertaining. I have a very sardonic sense of humor. So bad shit's funny to me and can be made funny, it can be really funny. So I don't want to give anyone the impression that this is like this dour slog. It's a funny story, but it's like, like the only way to document something that transpires over 23 years of your life is to it's your life story, So it's interesting too, because I had shortly after the 1996 trip, I was like, I'm not making work about myself. I'm not going to ever be in my work. I'm not going to have an image of myself in my work. It's going to be outwardly focused. It's going to be about other people. It's going to be about social situations, political stuff, turn the lens outward, and I developed a whole practice around that where sometimes my voice is in it as a kind of like unreliable narrator, or like the kind of Hunter S. Thompson strategy of journalism, where there's a character that's telling the story, but but a lot of the stuff I document, I research, try to talk about or expose an issue. It's not really about me. I don't do selfies, and then this project is like, it's literally like, 130 selfies in a row, So it's weird to get back into that and do something so personal and to be so personal. So like at the opening, all these people are like, oh, cool book. I'm going to buy this book. And they're walking away. Like my dad picked up a copy, some friends of mine picked up a copy, colleagues picked up a copy. And I'm like, I finished editing it long enough ago that I forget what's in it until I see someone walking away with it. I'm like, oh, damn. I had to text my dad and be like, hey man, that book, like just fair warning, like there's some grisly details in there about some really dark times I went through that I never told you about, and it's weird, it's a weird feeling to kind of put yourself out there like that. But yeah, in an art context, to me, in my, the way I conceptualize art is, it's what I was taught. Like art is the lived experience. The document is like the dead, dried husk of the pupated locust. It's like, that's what people want, but that's not the magic. That's just the residue, right? I mean, I like to make stuff and I like a good collage and a hot looking book and tried to do that. But like, to me, the art is in the action. And, I think it was a good exercise to kind of like dive back into my own psyche and like how I got to where I am. And it's also a little bit of a story of like trying to find some modicum of success as an artist, you know, because a lot of that, those dark times are oriented around having no success. And, you know, recently, so 2020, you know, when Heather and I were on the podcast about the fair, you know, we had just come off being included in an exhibition at the MCA. And to me as an artist, it's like, okay, man, that's pretty good. Like that's success for me. You know, it's not a living at this yet, but like that's pure recognition to the extent that I feel like validated as an artist, like to have work in a major cultural institution. And that was offered to us while I was out hiking. You know, I called her from Steheck in Washington. She's like, oh, hey, we got offered to be in the show at the MTA. So, you know, in the context of telling the story, it's like going from being like this jackass weirdo without a clue or hope in the world to being in a museum, you know, and what you go through in the middle, you know, because I spend a lot of time with young artists, obviously as a professor, and it's like, yeah, you know, you'll succeed, but it might be 35 years from now. And you might have to go through decades of no one giving a shit and still do it, you know, just for a little modicum of success. Some people hit the jackpot, but it's, you know, what percentage of artists actually succeed to the extent that they make a living? It's infinitesimally small, or gets any kind of like peer recognition or critical recognition, you know. For everyone who self-identifies as an artist, it's a fraction of 1,000%, right?
Yeah, it's like being a musician or an actor or whatever.
Totally.
The people that actually, you know, reach the upper echelon, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, for like how many podcasts are there for every serial, you know, like every breakout hit? Anything creative, it's like you don't do it for that reason, but in the back of your mind, you're like always building towards something. You know, you want other people to appreciate it. You want people to see your work. You're not in a vacuum. You know, any creative pursuit is this weird mix of doing it for personal edification, but also trying to kind of think about how to build on it, how to make it better, how to get people more interested, how to kind of market it a little bit, you know, how to talk about it so that people get invested, so that maybe you can quit your day job someday. You know, I think that's in the back of the mind of every like creative person. I mean, some people are smart enough to keep things like that a hobby, but a lot of us are too dumb to not try to professionalize things, right? But yeah, I mean, so taking, you know, it's like following the story kind of is following an artist from being like a kook, being taught by a bunch of kooks, to figuring out that they're a kook and embracing it, and then trying to persist through that to some sort of modicum of like acceptance, which is, I think, hopefully a good story for anyone who is a kook or trying to do something creative to kind of like enmesh in, right? I'm a big fan with like young artists, mostly my students, of just kind of giving it to them straight, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Because why sugarcoat it, right? Like, why not lay out the, you know, the real deal of what this life is all about, and that this pursuit is really a personal thing first and foremost, and anything beyond that, anything else that you garner through the journey is gravy, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. You know, in that way, when people kind of get out in the world and they're not finding any success, it's like they don't internalize that. They don't think it's just me. Right. I suck. It's like, no, the process sucks. You know, you're still good, but it takes a lot longer than you think it would take. You know,
and you got to find your people, you know, and that takes time. You know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally. When I was young, like after the first PCT and I first moved to Denver, I got on this thing where I was working in printing and like doing graphics for aluminum cans, which is something people think is fascinating, but it's really super not fascinating. So at a party, when they ask you what you do and you're like, I do the graphics for aluminum cans, like, oh my God, that's so neat. How does that work? And you get like 10 seconds into explaining it and they're just completely glazed over, But then if you're like, I'm an artist, that just always sounds so like, oh, where do you show your work? It's like nowhere, and it sounds so pretentious also, So I had one and two responses to what do you do? What do you do is such an insulting way to interface with someone because, it's not who are you?
Right.
What do you believe in? What are you passionate about? What do you do? It's like, so my favorite go-to is to say, I clean up portalets with a suction hose. Just like hold the stair for a while. Something you change it up and do grease traps. Clean out grease traps. Just can't get rid of the smell. Speaking of fake bios, right? But the other thing I would do if I was feeling sincere, which is pretty rare, like, what do you do? I'm like, oh man, I do all kinds of stuff. I skateboard a lot. I was kind of like, used to be kind of like an advanced amateur skateboarder. I wanted to like go pro skateboarding. So I do that. I still do that quite a bit. I bike a lot. Like I never drive. I love biking. I'm an artist too. So, I just spend a lot of time making art. I maybe go into some really long story about some art project that's like super weird. And then I'd be like, and, I'm a musician too. I'm not very good, but I'm in a band, and I would just keep talking without any interruption for questions as long as I could. And the other person would start getting like increasingly agitated. Right. And eventually, every single time, they'd just be like, like 25 minutes into telling them about all your passions in life and everything that you hold dear and important, they'd blurt out, for money. What do you do for money? And that's when you say, oh, I clean up portalets with a suction hose. Thanks. What do you do?
Oh, so I have a total appreciation for that. And this is why I like you, man. I once had a conversation, same conversation. This friend of my wife's, she was dating this guy and he was just kind of a douchey dude anyway, but he's this macho dude. And we're sitting in this brewery in Rapid City, South Dakota. And he asked me this question, and I don't know what inspired me to go down this path or why I even did it, because this is the way I operate. But I formulated this whole story about I fabricate these pipe cleaner dolls. And I had this big, long, drawn out explanation about how I go about doing it, the process, and then where I sell them. And the whole time the guy's just like, really? Like, you make money making pipe cleaner dolls? And he was just like, mind blown, right? And then at the very end, I was like, no, I'm a photographer, oh
my God.
Anybody else at the table that knew who I was knew that I was just gaslighting this guy, but I just couldn't help myself. I just had to take him down this path. And the longer I was speaking, the more elaborate the story got. And yeah.
And he left the table going, what an asshole.
Probably, but whatever.
Well, the goal of that kind of stuff is always to have the person have the self-realization of like, to think what an asshole. But then the next day to wake up, be staring at the ceiling and think, maybe I'm the asshole.
Right?
What an asshole question I asked. Yeah, that's true.
What's the saying? Like, you walk around all day and you keep meeting assholes, but at the very end you think, well, maybe it wasn't all those people I met. Maybe I'm the asshole. Right?
Yeah, it was the common denominator of all those guys.
Right.
Yeah. So, and I don't have that gut. I don't have that in me. Like, I can go along with a story, but man, to like totally mislead somebody for a while, that's uncomfortable for me. So, but I appreciate the story. But I'm the stupid idiot that asks that kind of like, what do you do for a living? Because that's how we've been kind of taught to engage. Like everything is about what you do to make money.
Yes.
It's not about who you are as a person. So
totally.
That's our culture. My whole thing. Yeah.
It's that whole like internalizing capitalism thing,
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but that's one of the struggles of being a creative person is that the thing that we use in our society to signify value is money. right? It's like that's how our culture works. It's like our value token. So if you're not making money at it, then it has no cultural value. I mean, and art's perverse in that we pay so much lip service to it having value, cultural value, but we don't support it financially. And, when you get down to brass tacks, the money is that's the common denominator of what everybody in our society knows means value, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's not a conspiracy, it's not like, and it doesn't need to be socialized. We don't need the state to sponsor us like the Medici's sponsored Da Vinci. Like I'm selling my work in Dateline for, everything's under $100. Nice, beautiful framed landscape photography, which by the way is the first time I've ever put something in a frame, and certainly the first time I've ever had any landscape photography in my work, for $75, and like I got this friend, John, he's a permanent house sitter. He lives in his car, and, he bought one. He bought one for, one of the pieces for $50. And like, that's what society needs to be doing for artists. It's just like, artists need to be like thinking about, to some extent, how can I do what I do and stay true to it while still thinking about what people actually want and want to live with? And how do I price it in a way that my peers can have it, instead of sucking up to some fat cat and having a gallerist be our middle person? It's just like some immediate direct, like, this thing's $50, and have someone who doesn't have a regular job buy it from you. It's like, right. If we can just do that regularly, then not only do we have, the abstract cultural value, we have universally recognized cultural value, because, unfortunately, or really for better or for worse, that's money. So like, if you're out there trying to make it as an artist, and you are getting scant cultural attention, but also no money, and you have to spend a lot of time on doing a job that is not related to your practice or tangentially related, and then that phase of your life lasts 35 years, that's rough, man. That's hard to get through. And a lot of people don't make it, and I think telling people that straight up, and just being like, if you want it easy in life, it's like, change your major to structural engineering, because man, you're just going to walk out here with your bachelor's degrees and get 6 figures. Yeah. It's like, that's easy. Art, not easy. Like, you have to be such a hustler. You have to be a fanatic. You have to be an entrepreneur. You have to be so driven, so organized, more professional than the next person in order to get $75 from someone, So, I mean, not to be too crass or like get it all down to money, but it's a conversation we don't really have enough in a creative space, is how society looks at it, what the value of it is culturally, but then what the value of it is financially, and like how people get demoralized by that, Yeah. So I don't know. I call it giving, when I tell my students this stuff, I call it giving a demotivational speech, because it's kind of what it is.
Yeah. That should be day one.
Yeah. And like, a lot of my students are design students, so they have it a little easier because they think, I get a job as a designer, but yeah, it's tough, man. Cause I don't think anyone ever told me that. In fact, so Kaprow, back to the guy, the department head of my department, our very first lecture, he performed this piece, 4 minutes and 33 seconds by John Cage, which is silence. So it's like, you can perform it on any instrument. It's traditionally performed on a piano, but you show up, you kind of do your normal, get ready, set your hands on the piano, and you're motionless. It's in 2 movements. I don't know how long the first movement is, but let's say it's like 2.5 minutes. And then you stop and you kind of like stretch it out. And then it's scored, you put up the next sheet of music, and then the next movement is also silence. So it's the very first thing he did, very first lecture. And he's like, okay, this is a piece of music by a contemporary composer who's highly influential in contemporary art, conceptual art. His name's John Cage. What was that all about? We're not doing anything else until you all collectively tell me what it was about. And there's like a lecture hall of like, 50 kids in it. It's like a gen ed class. So it's like only 10% of them are even artists. And, it took us like probably took us 5 minutes before anyone said anything. And he's just staring at us with his arms crossed at the front. And then once you realize it's like, okay, it's just going to be a staring contest until we try to crack this code. And then after we started talking and people throwing out ideas, maybe another 20 minutes later, we realized like, we're the sound. Like the air conditioning, the ambient sound of people rustling around, that's the sound. It's about that. And that's always part of it. Even if you were playing music, that was also part of the sound. And then we got to like, every time it's performed, it would be totally different, but the same. It had the exact same score, be performed the same way, but the sound would be completely different. And he's like, congratulations. You figured out what it's about. And it looks like we have an hour left in lecture. So why? Why would we do this? And then it's just like, oh my God, and eventually we just arrive at like, it's about the lived experience. It's about the ambient noise. It's just the lived, it's the weird random nature of life, And he's like, okay, yeah. And he's like, and Cage is like a Zen Buddhist master, by the way, FYI, So like starts putting it into context, and then it was just, and then he's like, okay, so your assignment that you're going to create work and you're going to bring it to your section and critique it with your teaching assistant. You need to ask someone what to do, write it down, whatever they tell you. And then without disclosing that information or any of this process, find a second person and ask them how to do it. So they can't know what it is you're supposed to do. You're asking them how to do it. It's just like, okay, what the fuck, right? So I remember I went and there's this, my roommate in the dorm, Brett. We figured out the reason they put us in the same room is because we both put on the questionnaire that we like to listen to loud rock music 24/7. Stick these two knuckleheads together. But I listened to like Soundgarden and he listened to like the Scorpions. And while to a college administrator, those are the same thing, they're not the same thing, So like, he was cool, but he wasn't really cool. I'm like, Brett, I have to do a project for my art class and I'm supposed to ask like someone what to do. He's like, I don't know, write a paper. So I'm like, God damn it. Because he's like he's like an econ major and he has to write papers for his class. So he's like, write a paper. I don't know, write a paper. So then there's this, this kind of new friend of mine in the cafeteria. I'm like, hey, I have this project. I have to ask you how to do it. He's like, well, what's the project? I'm like, I can't tell you. I just have to ask you how to do it. And he's like, watch every Jean-Claude Van Damme movie in a row. So I'm like, God damn it. Oh, I forgot. A crucial part. When Brett says, write a paper, I'm like, about what? And he's like, good versus evil. The nature of good versus evil. And then JP, watch all 7 Jean-Claude Van Damme movies in one sitting in a row, which by the way is like 15 hours of Van Damme, right? So I go to Blockbuster, I get my tapes, and I get up early in the morning and I pop in the first Van Damme, and I'm like 3 or 4 films into it, with some, food breaks and whatnot. And I'm like, I'm just going to start writing my paper because like, this is getting so boring and I just need to get this done. And I start writing this paper and it's like, there is nothing easier in this world than writing about good versus evil while watching a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, because that's all it is like, it's the most knuckleheaded good protagonist versus evil bad guy thing imaginable. And you start to watch it. It's like, here comes the plane flying into Hong Kong over the church with the cross. It's just like, now they're having the final scene where they're battling in a boiler room that's lit all red. So it looks just like hell. It's just like over and over and over again, the metaphors, right? So I write like a 10-page paper by the time the thing's over, proofread and everything, take it to the copy center, make a copy for everyone in class, stapled. And I show up to my section and like, we start critiquing it. It's like, this kid's got a painting, this kid's got a sculpture. I have this goddamn paper, I'm like, this isn't going to fly. So it's like my turn. So I stand up and I hand everyone a paper and I just kind of tell them the same story I just told you, and then, I got an A on that. So I'm like, fucking A, here it is, like, cause I was like, at that point I was sick of drawing and painting, but I knew I was an artist. And the thing I was most interested in was pranking people and doing weird shit and telling funny stories. So I'm like, man, I can combine these things and they like it. I get an A for this. That's my path, So it's pretty cool. But then when I got to grad school, so I was out of undergrad for like 10 years. I went to grad school in my mid 30s. I took this class called anti-art. And it's every kook and weirdo in the whole 19th, 20th century. So they start with Alfred Jarry, who's the guy who wrote the Ubu plays, where the very first line of the play is merde, shit in French. This is like 1880. Merde. And as soon as that leaves the lips of the character, the audience just riots. They rip all the seats out of the theater. They up and down the boulevard, smashing windows. Because it's just so aggro that someone uses curse word, So it starts with Alfred Jarry and it goes through like every weirdo in the whole history of art. So we're around like midterms and they're like, okay, this next person we're going to look, the teacher built it up. I got a real treat for you on Thursday, whatever. Because great stories in this class, super interesting weirdos. And then, Thursday rolls around. He's like, okay, so this person we're looking at today, this is the weirdest person, the weirdest of the bunch. This is like the top of the pyramid. And at this point, we're around in like the 1950s, maybe, in terms of the linear history. And it's like, are you ready? And he like flips the slide and it's a picture of Allan Kaprow, same guy who gave me that assignment, taught that class. And I just had this epiphany, like, God damn it, that's why it's been so extreme for me this whole time. This guy, who I thought was like doing it right this whole time, he's the fringiest of the fringe. And I just didn't know that, and it took going to grad school, like the School of Art Institute of Chicago, which is like this museum attached fine art with a capital F art school, to be told you and your lineage and your teachers are kooks, And I honestly didn't know that until that moment, like probably 15 years after that first class. I was going along thinking this person's just ahead of the curve. And I will still make the argument. I still think it is ahead of the curve. But in the commodified world of like fine art, all that stuff, like one of Kaprow's pieces is like, I've got a poster in my office. It's like all these people licking jam off of Volkswagen Bug in a junkyard. That's like a Kaprow thing, right? You can't sell that. You can't put that in a gallery. So like the art world wants nothing to do with that stuff, like you can't commodify that. So instead of going back to the space that Kaprow talked about in regard to Jackson Pollock, where it's like, well, we're going to reintroduce ritual and magic into art. They're like, no, we're just going to ostracize you, because this is unsellable and it's weird. It's weird. But, it did make a lot of sense. It was one of those epiphany moments, of which there have been a few I've related in this podcast where it's just like, where you're like, oh, damn, that's what's been going on all this time,
So to kind of play I'll play the novice, right? Like, I don't know, well, which I am, right? I don't know anything. Sure. So why is conceptual art of that type important in art in a contemporary sense?
Well, I think it informs a lot of almost everybody's practice now. It was like a brief moment in time where that type of art making completely walked away from like objects and commodities. So in the US, it was like Kaprow, and people in of that era and the next generation. So like Chris Burden, who I mentioned on the pyramid, might be like the generation after Kaprow, so like into the 1970s. So you have like body art, you have endurance-based performance art, where what you get as an end result is maybe like shaky film footage or Tetching Say or Sam Say. He did 5 one-year performance pieces. The first one was he lived in a cage in his living room for a year without talking to anyone, without watching any TV, without reading anything, just sitting in silence, and drew up a contract with a lawyer that was obligated to come and bring him food and take away his waste, right? And then the next year, he, I can't necessarily remember the sequence. I think the second year, he clocked in on a time clock every hour on the hour, 24 hours a day for 365 days. So he never slept more than an hour for an entire year. And his whole life was devoted to punching this clock. And so the documentation is incredible. They had the time clock and then a 16 millimeter camera on a tripod. And every time he'd punch the clock and turn around, they'd snap one frame of the film. And it's just a film. It's like you can watch it on YouTube. It's like a 4-minute film, but it's like a whole year goes, and you can watch hair grow, you watch the time clock spin, you know. He spent a year never leaving the island of Manhattan and never going inside a building. He spent a year tied by a 6-foot rope by the waist to Linda Montano, who he met 4 days before they roped up and didn't get along with the whole time. They didn't get along. They didn't have any agreement over what the piece was about. And then he spent a year not making art, thinking about art, or talking to artists. And then, was that it? It was something like that. Then he was like, I'm going to spend 13 years. Yeah, it was the last one was something along those lines. But then he's like, I'm going to do a 13-year piece where I don't make art. I don't talk to artists. I don't associate with artists. I don't look at art. And he was like a downtown New York staple art scene dude, right? And he just vanished. And like when I was in college with Kaprow, that was during the period where he had vanished. And like we were learning about this stuff, you know, and they're like, nobody knows where he is. There's a rumor he lives in rural Oregon and he's a carpenter, right? So 13 years later, he pops back up downtown New York. I'm back. My thing's over. And I have a DVD and a book if you want to buy, buy my DVD. And they were like, what are you going to do next? He's like, I'm retired. Yeah, I'm done. But then he's like, hey, I'm going to document my 13-year piece. It's going to be at this gallery on this day, show up. And so people show up and he just kind of like comes out, and he's a super serious guy. He's from Taiwan originally. So he's kind of short, diminutive dude. And he just kind of walks in front of the crowd and he goes, I kept myself alive. And then that was it. Like he's just nuts.
Oh my God. God.
So that kind of stuff. I mean, it's like, and then in Europe, there was like the Situationists International, which became more political and more like overtly Marxist, but not creating objects at all. Only lived experience, right? And that really shook things up, you know, in the art world. It was the dominant art form for a time, you know. People were still doing paintings and stuff, but like that was, if you read through, you know, like the history of 19th, 20th century art, there's like there's a whole chapter on this stuff at this time where it's like, that's what's, if you want to be culturally, critically recognized, you're making this kind of work. And so there's kind of no going back from that, you know. So now it's like we've gotten back into like, you know, heavily into like object commodity stuff, but work is way more conceptual, you know, I think than it would have been prior. And there's a more infusion of the artist into it. I think a great example of a little bit from that era and a little bit post that era is Andy Warhol, where talk about an object commodity like that. He's the master of that, you know, creating commodities, right? I mean, a painting of a soup can, you know, it's like he comes from advertising. He's using the language of advertising to create, you know, ostensibly fine art. But without the personality of Warhol, you don't really have Warhol's work, right? So it's like he has these really banal kind of like reproductions of common everyday things like Brillo boxes, like the soap boxes. And, people would be like, what is this all about? He's clearly like this master conceptualist, but his response is like, he's got this kind of glib kind of persona. And he's like, oh, I just think it's really pretty, don't you? And so he's kind of trolling, he's trolling, like, especially when you watch stuff now. And then like Basquiat, was a Warhol protege. There's a great interview of Basquiat with Mike Wallace on 60 Minutes. He's got these just insane paintings, this crazy frenzied graffiti. And the whole time they're doing this interview, Mike Wallace asks him these deep penetrating questions. And Basquiat's like, that's an excellent question. And he reaches over and he'll grab a giant handful of French fries and just shove them in his mouth. And the whole time he's answering the question, you can't hear a word he's saying because it's this garbled mess of this potato mash in his mouth. And then like fast forward, like Jeff Koons, I think. I mean, I debate Heather about this all the time. I think Jeff Koons he's a master troll. I think his work is I think he's a put on artist. He's like a postmodern Warhol. When you hear him talk about his, what we're looking at is a basketball tank submerged in a fish tank, and it's $800,000. And then you ask him about it, and it's just art gibberish, like the highest level art theory, critical speak imaginable. And you're like, this guy's full of shit. And some people kind of stop there where they're like, he's full of shit, I don't like him. But I'm like, he's full of shit, and he's full of shit on purpose. That's his comment. He's not telling, he's mirroring how full of shit the whole setup is, So that's to me, it's a conceptual move. It's like the infusion of the artist's person and personality into their work, being of like importance is probably like a post-performance kind of construct, which a lot of people reject because they're like, it's not about me. I don't want my personality in it, but that's the kind of stuff I like. There's a classic interview of Jeff Koons on Stephen Colbert, which is worth watching. It's on YouTube. And Colbert asks him, so Jeff Koons has like these monumental sculptures that's like, it looks like a balloon dog, but it's made out of like brushed chrome, and it's worth like, millions of dollars. And he's like coming at it with all this like art gibberish speak, total wrong audience. Colbert's audience doesn't know what the heck he's talking about. And Colbert's just kind of like respectfully smiling and nodding. And then as soon as he's done, he's like, so do you draw or paint? Like he's he just slays him. And then like Jeff Koons goes into something else and like Colbert cuts him off. And he's like, my daughter draws, he's just like doing like the every modern artist like nightmare trope of like what someone will interject with when they're trying to like talk about their work. It's funny. And Koons is kind of, he gets it, he plays along with it. But yeah. And I mean, I'm sure there's better examples, but I think that people kind of have these diverse practices now where they kind of ping back and forth between, and I do as well, things that are like object oriented and things that are kind of more ethereal and more experiential, right? And even on the level of like something like Meow Wolf, which is kind of like art entertainment, that's a great fusion of object, installation, and experience for people, and the whole thing's predicated on a concept. So like it's cool to look at, but if you start to unravel what the concept is, it becomes more interesting. And then there's the people who are working there are performative. They're engaging with you as part of the exhibition, as part of the installation, as part of the concept. They're in character, So I don't know if any of that makes sense to the culture at large without us have gone through this period of like performative art making.
Gotcha.
So
yeah,
I don't know. Wes, if you were truly a beginner, a long time ago, you would have just been like, when is he going to shut up?
I am fascinated by all that kind of stuff, because a lot of that kind of stuff really like makes my brain hurt trying to wrap my head around like, what the hell is this about and why are they doing it? And I never thought about Andy Warhol as also being a little bit of performance,
Oh yeah.
Totally. You think he's just a kook, and then he's creating this kind of odd art, based on consumerism, and I guess I never put the two together, but that's probably because I truly struggle with the whole idea of conceptual art. I mean, I can kind of see it. And I'm seeing, I'm obviously being enlightened by talking to people like you, because it's just absolutely fascinating. Sitting at a piano and not playing anything, I would have been like, I got to go because I don't get this, right?
Yeah. But you getting up and leaving, that's like that's the climax of the piece. Yeah.
Right.
You getting up and being like, this is bullshit. I'm out of here. Right. That's like in a Mahler symphony when it's all, like.
Right. That would have been my line too. This is bullshit. I'm out.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is this is something that was explained to me, and this is a good like cumulative thought about this. So my undergraduate advisor is this woman, Eleanor Anton. She's a performance artist, and she's fairly well known. She's like in the collection of the MoMA. She's a pretty famous 1960s artist. She would do these kooky things like she proclaimed her. So Solana Beach is this little beach town, like North County, San Diego, where she lived, and she would go out and drag, like, so with like a beard and a kind of hobo outfit. And she just proclaimed herself the king of Solana Beach. And she had like this scepter, and she'd go just introduce herself to people as the king. I'm the king of Solana Beach. And it was just this thing where she'd just go out every day and do it and repeat it, with like not really a plan per se, just like a repetition. And she ended up getting pulled into these like property disputes and city council meetings and like city politics, because people would be like, they'd be at an impasse and they wouldn't be able to resolve something. And someone would be like, let's go down to the beach and find the king and ask the king, so that was something that manifested just through her repeated presence, So she explained to me, and like even drew it as a diagram. It's like when you make work that is about the lived experience and is enmeshed in everyday life, you're oftentimes just repeating something. Like you keep going back to the same place, you keep performing the same action. It's like a meditative, repetitious process. And what happens when you're doing that is you always have a goal. You have this hypothesis about what you think is going to happen and where you're going to arrive at. And without that goal and without that hypothesis, you probably never start the project in the first place. That's like the impetus, like what you're going to make and what it's going to mean, right? But when you start the process, you kind of enter into this open, neutral territory. So she drew it as like a line entering a giant circle. The circle is like this open field, and that's like the nature of life. And what's going to happen somewhere when you're traversing this circle is something's going to come at you from an oblique angle. Something's going to happen that's going to be unexpected and not part of your plan. And that is the thing to watch out for. That's what you're really doing this for, because that will knock you off your trajectory. So she's drawing this line, and then she draws another line coming up, and now it's bounced you away from your goal. And now you're going like up out of the circle in a different direction. That's what you're seeking, is that moment. And then the end result as a direct consequence of having this collision with this unexpected event. And that thing is like, the unexpected is like the randomness and the chaos of daily life, right? Your original goal, that's like achieving that against all odds is just gratifying or satisfying your own ego. But it's really not about anything that anyone cares about. But this new direction that is a result of being open and sensitive to the randomness of life, that new direction and that end result is about life. It's about the nature of life. And it's interesting because of it. It's unexpected, it's interesting and more profound, right? So that's something it makes a lot of sense. And it's something I try to enact in my own practice. I'm always out like looking for the thing, like what's the weird thing that turns this into being something that's kind of like rote to something that's profound, right? And with all the PaCT stuff, I mean, it's like losing the suit, not once, but twice, that's kind of the thing. Enforcing the concept of like wearing it or having it, or even putting it in the time capsule and getting it back. That's like the goal.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have been out there without that goal. But losing it is the thing that makes you question, like, what am I really doing out here? Like, what's this really about? And then the end result is kind of more interesting to other people, because they can kind of see themselves in it. And they could see themselves in it because it's like, what makes it make sense is like that it's like random, it's a little chaotic, it's just kind of about the way things go.
Yeah. So maybe not having the experience with her, maybe you wouldn't have drawn that conclusion,
right,
during the PaCT thing.
Yeah, I'm sure not. Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah. And it's like everyone's just kind of a product of their environment, in their education.
Yeah.
So I'm a kook because I was taught to be a kook. But I was
kooks will relate to that.
Right? Yeah.
And that's
I was in the right frame of mind to hear it too.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people who kept bringing paintings back to critique, and they didn't get good grades.
That's funny.
Oh God. I think this is really important work that you've done.
Thank you. That's great.
And I would like to see people go explore it. Obviously, you have this exhibition and you want people to go see it too.
Mm-hmm.
I think it really helps. Obviously, I had an appreciation at the opening on Friday for it on multiple levels, but I didn't get an opportunity to deep dive into it like this discussion that we've had today. And now it makes it's even more meaningful to me. Now it makes me want to go back and explore it again, which I was planning on anyway, because it just got crazy in there. It's not a large space to begin with. And, and it was an opening. So, everybody and their brother wants to have your attention for that, 2 minutes or whatever that you're
everyone and their dad in our case, right? You got cornered by my dad, who can also tell a stem winder. So
I really enjoyed talking with your dad, just so you know. That was a really, really nice conversation I had with him, and somebody I would love to talk to again. I don't know that I'll get that opportunity, but I mean, it was fun talking with him and kind of getting, a little bit of insight from him and, to talk about you and your youth and that sort of thing. Talk about, without giving, we've already talked extensively and people get the idea of what this is about, but what are they going to see when they walk in there? What is available to them? Because you've put together these books. I want you to talk in depth a little bit about that.
Yeah. So Dateline's, like you said, it's a small space. I'd guess the footprint of the gallery is like, I don't know, 500 square feet, maybe even a little less. Probably like three walls, maybe 3.5 walls in a bookshelf. So the main wall, the back wall is the animation, like the frame by frame animation as a video projection. And then the rest of the space is essentially a collage. The elements of the collage are process and ephemera of printing the books. So, the show is related to month of printmaking. And someone who works in a print medium, I kind of embrace that. One example being like one of the flip books deconstructed is just in a line that runs through the whole gallery on every wall, one sequential frame after another, like with an inch gap. And then things like pieces of film or press sheets, all that's tacked right to the wall. The kind of repeating shape or motif is like a symmetrical cross, like a crossroads, essentially. So there are 4 main groupings that are in that shape. 2 of them are comprised of 4 framed photos that will be too old, too new. And they're photos of from 1996 or 2019 that are just like particularly beautiful, shots. There's usually a person in the shot, but they're small and in the distance. So that's like when I'm just like definitely my first foray into landscape photography. Not really. I mean, I do that, but I don't show that kind of work because to me, it's not like conceptual. And then like the line of frames will run behind those frames or in front of them. And then under each grouping is kind of like an altar. So one of them is a box, and it has like a head in it with my high school graduation cap with instead of a tassel, it has a rosary. And then it's a glass head, and the head is full of hair. And then on top of that wooden box is a briefcase that's full of human hair, including some of Dylan's hair from before we went on the PCT in 96 and some hair from a hiker in 2019. And then there's also the next one, the main grouping, there's a light table it has a recessed compartment, and it has like a kind of cross made out of Dylan's hair, the braid that he gave us at our wedding, crossed with a necklace of both he and I's hair intertwined with a bone and a pacifier. And then there's one that has like the shoes I wore on both trips and the hats I wore. And it's wrapped in the shirt I wore this most recent time, all pretty grimy, grisly looking garments. And on top of that is a Bible I have where I've removed about half of the numbers with an X-Acto knife, which is my other like multi-decade long project. And then there's 2 tables that are for the book. And one table is like a physical manifestation of the bibliography of the book. So all the books cited in my book are there, like in physical form. So it's lots of content about art, but lots of content about like the history of walking as a recreational pursuit or as an athletic pursuit. And then there's a table of all the drafts of the PaCT book, the earliest one being in 2000, a significant amount being from 2007 when I was in grad school, all the way up to the kind of current book. And then there's a collage on the wall behind that was something that was kind of a late ad. When I was trying to find all the stuff for the show, I found a lot of cool old ephemera, and I made this collage that kind of feels like it's a little bit lightning shaped. And then to the right of that is like a bookshelf that has, so the collection of books is like, there's a written book that's black and white. It's on 2 different paper stocks, 1 paper stock for each era. It's got letterpress covers. There's a zine that goes with that book. That's the photos from Oregon and Washington. Then there's a flip book. That's the photo animation. And then there's a zine called Man-Made, which is about the time Dylan and I walked across Wyoming, which was about the halfway point in between the 2 PCT walks. And then a bunch of prints, but the prints are by and large like press sheets or test sheets for the printing of the book covers. So, stuff that would sometimes go in the recycle bin. Instead, I'm like, I don't know, maybe someone wants to buy these for $10. So we'll just have them and see if anyone likes them. So that's kind of the setup. It's a little nonlinear, just like the book. So there's no place really to start when you go in there. And it's an installation. So it's like it's a singular composition, like the whole gallery space, with different kind of areas or stations that you can get focused on one time period or one aspect of it. So if anyone who's seen my work, either like the IS Fair or the MCA show, knows, I'm like, I love my tacks, man. I'm just like 1,000 tacks in this thing. Everything's tacked to the wall. And, it's a lot of information. It's intended to overwhelm a little bit when you walk in. It's like,
there's a lot to take in.
Yeah. Our motto, Heather and I both, we stole Andy Warhol's motto, which is leave them wanting less. So I have students that are working on their thesis show right now. And a lot of them have never shown their work in public. And I was like, I was in the midst of a demotivational speech. I was like, the goal of something like this is not to have your peers or other artists see it and think that it looks nice and that you did a good job. The goal is to have another artist see it and be like afraid, with how much time and effort you put into it, and maybe that's just me or my competitive nature, but like, you don't half-ass the stuff. If you're privileged enough to have an opportunity to show your work to the public in a nice space and you don't bring it, then you're doing a disservice to the whole entire discipline. Like you gotta, when you show work, it should be something that people think is profound on some level, and oftentimes that's just like, you have to put in the work, you have to really push yourself. So that's what I try to do. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but it's not a casual enterprise for me. Like I'm really going for it. So that's why you get the density of information sometimes. I want it to be like something where you feel like I couldn't possibly absorb all this in one visit, or even think that it's like this tableau where it's just kind of surface, that if we really start picking this apart, there won't be substance to it, but to actually subvert that and be like, if you actually start reading the stuff, then it just goes even deeper, that you can't find the bottom of it where it falls apart and it's just information for information's sake. It's like all has meaning. That's like always my goal. And in this case, it's like, I worked on this thing, not continuously, but I started it in 1996 and I just finished it. So someone did ask me, like at the show, it's like, because I've gone for 10 years without touching it at times. Right. But someone's like, oh, do you really so this is like, you've been working on this forever. It's like, no. Like, it's in stints. I was like, really, truly, to be honest, this just documents just a huge exercise in procrastination is what's really going on here. Like, so when I say it's like, I've been working on it 26 years, I probably really only worked on it for like 6 months, over 26, well, longer than that. Cause if you count the hiking as being generative, but like, let's say I worked on it for a year, spread out over that time. But part of the magic of it is like the amount of time that's elapsed, because a lot of people, a lot of my friends, a lot of my students, it's like, they might not even be 26, it's kind of, it's like, yeah, you can start something now and like keep spinning its wheel for decades. And like, it becomes cool. Like I was talking to one of my favorite Denver artists, Tom Bond. I don't know if you're all familiar with him.
No,
I don't know him that well. We're not even friends per se. I really like his work. Try to always support his work and go see it when it's up. And he came by and we were talking about this concept of repeat a dumb idea until it's a good idea, which is a little bit of my MO. And I was like, that's a graffiti strategy. That's kind of where that comes from. Like Shepard Fairey is like a great example of that. Banksy, or even lesser known people, taggers. It's like, do it once and it's dumb. Do it a million times, it's profound. So partly what makes things like have weight or heft to them is like the fact that you did it for so long, or that you did it that many times, So like those original Andre the Giant Has a Posse stickers that Shepard Fairey was putting out in the mid 90s in RISD, he printed over 1 million of those, so it's like, it's a dumb little sticker, but man, once you see it all around the world for 15 years, then it's a phenomenon, So
petition counts.
Yeah. Right.
And we've talked to numerous people that, that's, part of their philosophy.
Well, I think that's part of, that's the ritual and magic aspect of art. People who are into, so if we go back to small scale societies, there might not be an artist and a priest in your town. It might be the same person, right? And what they're doing is any type of ritual or prayer or magic is like repetition. That's the core fundamental aspect of it. Prayer is repetition, meditation is repetition. So art, I think that stuff and art come from the same part of the human psyche. And so there is a desire of a lot of artists to repeat things in that way, and you'll hear people say, oh, it's very meditative. It's like, yeah, it's like literally meditative. So I think there's something to that. And I'm interested in that for sure.
For people that want to explore this work further, but they don't live here in Denver and won't be here between now and the end of the month.
Yeah. Sure.
How do they go about, obtaining these books that you and zines that you've made for this show?
Yeah. I've got a kind of small galaxy of things on the internet in relation to this. So the project blog and the project Instagram are PaCT.report. So the website, that's the URL, like .report is the suffix, like .com. So it's PaCT.report. And that's a blog that both Dylan and I contribute to. And then there's an Instagram that's the exact same, PaCT.report. I don't post on those as frequently as I do on my main thing, which is IsPress. So the website of IsPress is ispress.co, for like company, or I think it was Colorado. And then I have an Instagram, which is at is.press. And any of those places, you can find your way to the books. And you can find some content and information that is free. Books are very affordable, by the way. So this is like a limited edition art book with letterpress printed covers, 300 copies, numbered and signed, and they're $30 a piece. I really try to price things so that people can have them. That's cheaper than like an art book at the tattered cover. So that's important to me. And it's also important to me to have some of the content like just for free, right? So you can see the animation, you can read an excerpt of the book on either space, either blog or either Instagram's like link in the bio will get you to any of this stuff. Dylan maintains a blog, and he has for a long time, called cyberhobo.net. That has some stuff about PaCT, but it's also about his whole practice of engaging with the outdoors. And he's actually he's one of the first people that I know of ever to blog from the wilderness. He was doing it with a flip phone and a Palm Pilot. For a long time, his professional life was oriented around engineering software to get like telecom and network enabled devices to talk to each other. So he invented ways to blog directly to WordPress before smartphones. And so his trail name, people who are out on the trail a lot get trail names. Mine's man-made. His for a long time was Cyber Hobo, because of that. He's abandoned that because now when he goes out hiking, he doesn't take a phone at all. When we were on this trip in 2019, right before he left, he tossed his phone in the truck. So he didn't have a phone. He navigated us through the entire thing using a compass and topo maps,
Nice.
Just like he actually, his project was to use this exact same technology he had in 1996. So he had a compass, a topo map, a micro cassette recorder, which was very hard for him to track down and find tapes for, on eBay, and a disposable 35 millimeter film camera, also hard to find. But so he changed up his trail. Now he's Dylan 96, which is trail name. Cause he's like, I can't be like Cyber Hobo and be like walking around with no phone, just doesn't make any sense.
Oh man. In this aluminum suitcase full of hair.
Yeah.
Is it really free to a good home?
Yeah. So like on the price list, I mentioned that, everything is like $75 or under, except that collage that looks like a little lightning bolt. That's $1,111. And it comes pre-hexed, by the way. And then the briefcase full of human hair is free to a good home. And I actually have this in every show I do somewhere. It's like my Easter egg. So it was at the Is Fair. The last time I had a solo show at Dateline was 2016. It was there. Also free to a good home. It's always free to a good home and nobody ever wants it. So I don't know what's going on with that.
I don't know why somebody wouldn't want to take this home.
And we should say, because this is radio, this is like a slimline aircraft aluminum briefcase that looks like it's full of $1,000 bills or cocaine or the mortgage to your next house. And it's got so much hair in it that it's busting out of the sides when it's closed. And the hair is not curated. This is literally hair piled into a briefcase and all matted together into one disgusting hunk of like 35 people's hair. Some of it's in bags because that's how I got it. In fact, this woman who gave me some of her hair on the PCT after she heard one of these stories, she's like, do you just put it in there with all the other hair? And I'm like, well, that's how you give it to me. So she put hers in a bag. She's like, I don't want my hair to intermingle with the other hair. And I mean, this whole thing, I should say, it started off as like a gag. So I think of it as like a prop gag, right? So you know how comedians who use prop gags. So my grandmother collected all kinds of stuff, owl figurines, salt shakers, matchbooks, but she wouldn't own up to collecting anything. If you're like, Grandma, why do you collect salt shakers? She's like, oh, I don't collect them. People just give them to me. They think I like them. And so I was like, I'm going to steal Grandma's line, but apply it to a collection that's like so psycho and abject that it would just be incongruous with that kind of statement. So, so I have this human hair collection, but I don't really collect it. People just give it to me. And that is true. Like, I never make an effort to like go get some hair and put it in this. This is all hair people have just given to me once they find out I have a hair collection. And there's dreads in there. Like there's shavings, there's like stubble, and I don't maintain it or anything. It's just shoved in this box. There's a little thing of scissors in case you want to add to it. But someone's like, man, some reactions I get, the main reaction is like, that's disgusting. But then some people will be like, oh man, that's dangerous, man. I can't believe those people gave you their hair. Because, if you need to hex someone in certain circles, it's like, you need some hair, right?
Yeah. Wow.
And then someone else, my friend who's more of a conceptual artist, he's like, man, you need to do 23andMe on that whole entire box, and like do genetic sequencing of all this and figure out where all these people are from and map it out in a giant infographic, which is a great idea, I maybe would do that.
That would be a major project, though, a major undertaking.
Yeah. And then someone's like, if you can live long enough, you can probably clone those people. It's like, if you could just hang on for another 40 years,
could be invaluable.
Yeah.
When it's, I assume that you just don't have this sitting around when it's not on display at some, one of your shows or whatever. It's at your house, but do you display it open for people when they come over? Okay.
No. Someone did ask Heather, like, where do you keep all this stuff? She's like, oh, just around the house, But it's up in the studio. It's just like, it's handy, but it's not, it's closed. It's funny at Dateline, Jeremy's like, hey man, like nothing personal or anything. I don't want you to feel weird about this, but I have to keep my cats locked in the back now because they just love your suitcase full of hair. Like they want to snuggle in it. They want to grab one of the little dreads and batter it around the floor and take it back to the bed and snuggle with it. And sure enough, like a couple of them got out, when we were installing it. Yeah, they go right for that hair. It's like a moth to a bright light. They're just like, I want that. So
yeah, that's crazy.
So my question about this when I was going down this path with you is when it's not on display and it's been sealed up for a length of time, is there a smell when you open it? Or, no. Okay.
I don't think so. I don't smell very well. So I'm blessed with poor smelling and poor hearing. It's like one of the greatest things that ever could have been gifted to me in this life.
Heather.
Yeah, for Heather.
Heather has extremely acute smell, and she's never mentioned that it smells.
Okay. Well,
although someone did suggest I throw it in a bonfire, which that would definitely smell.
Oh my God, that would be horrible.
That would be
horrible.
My hair is going to go in it here pretty soon.
Is it?
I think so. I mean, I don't know about soon, but for people who have never seen me, I have really long hair. I don't know. It's nipple length or longer. I haven't cut my hair in 10 years, but it's really just it's just an elaborate comb over, man. It's all going away. I really only have a square inch of hair on the crown of my head. And it's just all the way back, halfway back here. I got nothing. Right. So I'm just I told Heather, it's when I start looking like a crypt keeper, you let me know, 'cause I don't want to.
That's awesome. So I think you wait till you put your hair in it and then you sell it, because then it's going to be worth something. Are you going to bag yours, or are you just going to let it intermingle with
that's a good question.
I think you should bag yours. I think you should bag it and put your name on it.
Even in a bag, it gets really matted. It gets really,
oh, I'm sure.
It was funny because I was building this little shrine. So it's this thing's on top of this box, and the box is this glass head with the graduation hat. I was like, there should be hair coming out of the neck of this glass head. And I'm just grabbing some hair out of it, shoving it up there. And I was like, oh, wait, this is actually my ex-girlfriend's hair from 1996, who I was dating when I should use her hair for this. That's the most conceptually resonant hair to use for this time period, So sometimes I'll know whose it is, and it'll be cool to kind of have a moment with it. But
yeah,
it's all matted and kind of dreaded together. So yeah, even if you put it in the bag, that happens.
Parents and their first kid's haircut.
Yeah.
I mean, I had some of my hair in a photo album for decades. I don't know where it's at now. Might be in your box. I don't know.
Yeah. So we were at this show, and I'm getting pulled in every direction at once, talking to people. Heather and I are each other's assistants, so we work together, and when we don't, we help each other. So when one of us needs help, the other one chips in, and then Jeremy, of course, the gallery owner, he's like me, he gets pulled in a million directions. And because we're not selling high dollar wall art, we're selling books for cheap, or the zines are $10, so it's a lot of grab and go stuff. So people want to buy this stuff at the show, and it's you're running a cash register. It's not like a typical hobnob thing where someone comes back and buys the $5,000 painting, later. It's oh, cool, I swing by, I'm going to buy the zine for $10. So Heather very graciously stepped up and was being the merchandiser, or selling the stuff. But at some point I'm talking to someone and I hear her saying Pete, and I'm like, huh? And she's like, this person bought a PaCT pack, which is every single book and zine. So they need their human hair bookmark.
Oh, way.
And I'm like, okay. I mean, this wasn't something we planned on, but she and I have very good rhythm, together in terms of our comedic timing or whatever. So I knew exactly what she was talking about. So I just walked over to the box, grabbed the scissors, and cut off a foot long lock of my hair and handed it to the person. And it was just kind of fun moment. But then it became okay, that was funny and weird, but that actually was an upsell. And now other people want their human hair with their PaCT pack. And so I'm I think I'm going to cut my hair a lot sooner than I thought here. It's going to be tonight.
Just one hunk at a time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Special order. So you just, just every time you get a special order, you cut a piece off and.
Yeah. Right. I should, but I'm into abject stuff. I don't know if Todd, if you remember from the Fair, from following my Instagram last summer, how I was collecting the used plackers.
Yeah.
Those flossers and stuff where you photograph them and tag them and bag them and geomap them and stuff. I'm just into stuff like that. That's just super gross,
And it is super gross. And I see those things all over the place. We had a whole discussion about it at the Fair, but I'm walking down the street and there's actually down where that bridge goes across the highway there, that pedestrian bridge.
Yeah. Like in Highlands.
Yeah. I was hanging out there one day and, there's a couple benches out there, and by the bench, there's a fucking pile of these,
flossers
of these flossers. And I'm like, who sits here every day and flosses their teeth? And then just throws them on the ground. That's just gross.
That's gross. That to me. I mean, what's interesting about that to me is, because, this is one of those examples with the Eleanor Anton thing. I was just kind of attracted to them in this perverse way. And I was like, I'm going to start collecting those because they're so gross. And people really need to stop doing that. And it's just like microplastics, and it's just completely disgusting. And I was like, but you know what would really convince people how disgusting they are is a giant collection of them. And just be like, I found all these in 2 months on the ground or something, right?
Yeah.
So I start collecting them. And then I have this like epiphany where I'm just like, I'm thinking way too much about flossers, you know, because the other thing I started doing is like, I need to be able to identify their make and model because I'm putting them in bags, you know, numbering them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'd be like, you know, like that's a flosser, or like that's a gum brand, co-merched Colgate flosser mint, you know, like to know exactly what they're called.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking way too much about them. But then at some point I'm like, oh my God, these flossers are like the pivot point in the rise and fall of humanity. Because, you know, hear me out. Modern dentistry, you know, current industrialized society is probably somewhat predicated on modern dentistry.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've all ever had a root canal or anything like that. But one of the first things that enters your mind when the root canal scenario just first starts and you realize what it is that if you were a caveman, you would be dead in a month. Right.
Right.
And you're like 35 years old or something. And you're just like, that would have been it for me. And I think that is the demise of a lot of people, like pre-dentistry. People, you know, dentistry has expanded our lifespan tremendously. Right. And it's gotten so ingrained in society that now people need to floss with these goddamn little plastic things all the time, toss them out their car windows. And then that's like the Anthropocene. It's like, you know, an alien culture a million years from now is going to dig down to the 2020 layer and find just fucking flossers, you know, like 6 inches thick, right? It's like, we're going to kill the oceans with these goddamn flossers, you know? And it's just like, we're here because we floss, but we're going to die because of these goddamn, you know, like,
right.
You just start to see it through this kind of lens, you know?
I was thinking the same thing that you just said, that the 3% of our DNA, when they come back to revisit, this is what they're going to find, be disgusted by it.
That's right. Yep. Exactly.
So here's my thing on the hair thing. If you continue to do it, I think you should, if the case breaks and you need a new one, a plexiglass clear case would be maybe the flossers should all go in a plexiglass clear. Briefcase.
Right.
Yeah.
I was like, you know, the other day, I was like, the flossers, I need to make a zine with all the flosser pics. And Heather's like, yeah, that's a great idea. I was like, maybe I should make the edition of the zine. It should be like annual. And every year I should go out and pick up flossers. And I should make as many zines as I have flossers. And you can get a free used flosser with each zine. And she's like, no to that. Like, that's no. It's like people would want the zine if it's pictures of the flossers. If it came with a flosser, no one wants the zine.
I think you ought to collect enough hair and approach somebody that can make it into a sweater, and then you wear the sweater.
Yeah, like a hair shirt.
Sweater. Yeah,
literally. Yeah.
Oh, God,
that's a great idea. Yeah, I'm into the aesthetic intersection of the aesthetic and art. Like that's a lot of the hiking stuff is like people who are into aesthetics, like going on a hike like that. It's like the people who do the pilgrimage to Lhasa where they prostrate themselves like every single step of the way for 1,000 miles. You know, it's like people are into the pain. That's why they're there. They want to suffer, you know, they want to grind it out. And I get into that stuff too. Like there's some level of masochism going on where it's just like, you have to have this kind of sick fascination with being uncomfortable, you know, to do that kind of stuff. And I think a lot of artists are like that too. And especially a lot of those 1960s, like body artists, like the Chris Burden. I mean, Chris Burden's most famous for having someone shoot him in the arm with a rifle in a gallery in front of an audience, you know, just winged him, you know, he hired a marksman. It's like avoid the bone, shot through the fleshy outer part of his arm. But then he did that thing where he bought a 30-second commercial spot on LA network TV. And it's just him with no commentary, grainy black footage. He's wearing a Speedo and he belly crawls across a giant pile of safety glass.
Oh my God.
They aired it as a commercial, like on TV. So that kind of stuff, I like that stuff.
That's crazy.
Like, I don't want to do it like that, but I think there's something to it. I think that's cool. Like only an artist in today's day and age, artists do that, and like religious nuts, you know?
Oh man, this is really fun. I really appreciate you reaching out and making us aware that the show is happening. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm going back again, probably next weekend, I imagine.
Cool. Yeah.
And you have an artist talk at the end of this whole thing, right? Where you're going to tell tales from the trail.
Yeah. Artist tales. Yeah.
When is that?
So it's on the 30th. So Dateline is always open Saturday afternoons. It's also going to be open Sunday, the 20th. Because I'm going to gallery sit that day, and it's going to be open the Wednesday before that in the evening, and then whenever Jeremy's home too. Like you could sometimes catch him on a Friday night, but then we're having artist tales, on the Wednesday the 30th at 7.
Oh, it's on a Wednesday. Damn it!
And I'm gonna so it's not a reading, because for a long time when I started writing books, I started doing. I've always done like storytelling. And I'm good at doing that. And then I'm a fair writer, and I started doing readings, but readings are readings. Like there's not, it doesn't have the same energy as just telling a story. So now I think I'm going to kind of hybridize. Like I'll maybe read enough so you can get a sense of what the writing's like, and then just kind of like go off from there and just tell the story, or vice versa. Yeah. So that's kind of a new way to approach it. Or I'm just trying to find the best way to navigate telling a story that's based on written material, like honor the written material without reading it, you know.
I think I would read it first if you care about my input. I would read a little bit first and then go into the storytelling, because I think it would be captivating. Yeah. Anyway, for what it's worth.
No, that's good advice. Because I think you read the story and you start getting into it, and then it's like, okay, let me just tell you how this goes. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Is it going to be recorded at all? Are you going to have that on your?
I haven't really thought that far.
That'd be kind of cool, because cool. Wednesdays are not good for me because I'm 400 miles away. But but I would love to hear some of the stories. So
maybe it would be pretty simple to do. Yeah.
You can do a podcast of it.
Yeah, I'll think about it. For sure.
It's a mini series podcast, like 6 episodes.
I'll have to find someone to do it. Actually, my buddy, John, who bought who I was mentioning before, who bought one of the frame pieces. He's a really excellent videographer. Yeah. AV guy. Maybe I'll tap him and see if he can record.
That'd be cool. I think it would be cool. That's just me though. I'm selfish that way. I want to see it.
Well, I mean, I like to get the work out there.
Yeah.
And tell it, and having a story like that is good. I'll give you one last thing. This is combining Kaprow, conceptual art, the abject, and telling a good story. It might be a little bit much for some people. So, we'll do the old, if you're listening to this with children, now is the time to shunt them away into their rooms and shut the door until supper. So Kaprow, the second day of class, the first day of class was 4 minutes, 33 seconds, right? By John Cage. Second day of class, he comes in, he tells us this story. I can't remember the name of the artist. Heather knows the name of this artist, but I'm blanking on it. But he doesn't tell us the name of the artist. He just tells us, so there used to be this call-in show in LA in the 70s for performance artists to call in, tell stories about their work, or any artist. And I heard this story on it about this guy who drove down to Tijuana, and he bribed a mortician to let him copulate with a corpse. And, this is like a lecture hall full of freshmen in Southern California. Half these people are like from Orange County. They're religious, this is like, what the heck is this person telling? He'd probably get fired for telling us the story in like 2022, right? So this guy pays a mortician to let him copulate with a corpse. And then he drives back over the border, and without taking a shower or changing his clothes or doing anything, he gets a vasectomy. And he's like, what's it about? So we're just like, what the, I was like, on one hand, I'm like, hell yeah, this is wild. This is like the wildest thing I've ever heard. Definitely found the right major, and then the other half of me is like, what the fuck? That's so extreme. But we worked it out, man, because we're like, well, after a bunch of conjecture, it's like, well, it's a paradox. He put his last living seed into a dead human, and a lot of art is predicated on paradoxes, right? And it's this forum in which we like reflect on the kind of nature of living, right? If you have a good paradox, it makes you kind of think about things in a different way. And then he's like, yeah, but like, how about the way it's documented? It's like, well, what do you mean? It's like, well, he called into this radio show and just told the story. And now I'm telling you, because I heard the story, and you're going to go back to your dorm. You're going to tell your roommate, which I did. I ran right back to my dorm and I told Brett all about it while we were listening to some Scorpions, and now I'm telling you and everyone who's listening to this. And it's such a easy to recount story, short, and it's compelling in this creepy way, right? It's easy to remember. It's easy to tell. And so this person lives on in infamy. I mean, this work lasts forever because it's like an urban legend, it's something that lives in the culture. It doesn't need to be in a frame. It doesn't need to be written down. Anything that's compelling, conceptually compelling enough and easy enough to digest and easy enough to retell lives forever. And there's certain magic to that. And that also, not that particular action, obviously, but that method is something that kind of stuck with me too. So to me, I think maybe that's a good parting thought, just like a good story is sometimes enough.
And this could push our podcast over the next hump. Because people be like, yeah, well, it's probably not complex enough. You'd have to have it complex where you're like, you need to tune in and hear this story because it's unbelievable. But wow, that's a trip. But you're absolutely right. It does live on because it's simple and it's weird enough that you want to tell somebody. And
it is true. And the name of the artist is in my book, like, because Heather's like, oh, you know who that artist is? She knew. But
and you can Google it probably.
Yeah, I don't recommend Googling.
Oh, because it's
with a corpse, because you get a lot of
don't do that, boys and girls.
Yeah, I figured out in my 14 years of teaching that sometimes you got to test to see if the internet works. When you're in the middle of class,
right?
And typically, I do that just by Googling something.
Yeah,
see if Google works. And through a lot of trial and error, I've realized that the only safe thing to Google, if you're Google image searching in a classroom full of college students, is polar bear. All you get is cute polar bears swimming and crawling across the ice. There's no creepy, fucked up thing called polar bear out there.
It's good.
It's just bears. Just nice big white bears. Yeah. But what you're talking about,
you're going to find some shit. Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah, NSA is going to hear about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to light up some diodes and at the NSA.
And you might get a visit.
Right. Yeah. There's actually and I heard this through another podcast, so it's not, but and I don't know what the word is because they wouldn't say it or what the item is, but there's a whole child pornography ring that has photos. If you Google a certain type of, I think it's a part on a car, that then it takes you to this pornography site, and I guess it's pretty brutal. But so it's weird. Yeah, you got to be careful Googling, boys and girls. Don't. Yeah. There's a lot. I'm just curious who the artist is now. So that's
dark corners of the internet. Yeah.
Well, you got to buy his book now.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. We actually, Heather and I had this joke for a long time. Of we were going to start a band. I don't know if you all start hypothetical bands, come up with band names, but our band was going to be called Sex for Drugs, and our like motto was going to be like, just Google us.
Yeah.
Oh man,
that's funny.
Yeah, I think it's funny.
I think it's hilarious.
A lot of people don't think that's funny.
Yeah.
They probably quit listening to the podcast about an hour and 15 minutes ago. So we're fine. You're fine. No worries.
If you hung out this long, you truly are part of the the freaks.
Yeah. Right.
Oh man.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, man.
Yeah.
And
appreciate it.
I always enjoy talking with you. And I will say this, this has been an education as far as doing this podcast and all the stuff we learn all the time. But you and Heather, you have made me think differently when it comes to what art is and what it can be and the potential. Awesome. Mm-hmm. So you've taught me a lot of stuff. It's been an education, and I really appreciate what you bring. And I love what you do.
Thank you. Yeah. I really appreciate that. And I love trying to expand people's horizons. I can't remember who, I think this is Marshall McLuhan, the quote. I don't know that 100%, but that's my first recollection. But art is anything you can get away with. So I think that's good way to lead out. Yeah.
Again, check out Peter's exhibition, PaCT, A Journey Beyond the Horizon, at Dateline Gallery through the 30th of March. There's an event happening on the 30th that we were talking about at 7 p.m. where Peter will regale with tales from the trail. Dateline Gallery is located at 3004 Larimer Street, Denver, Colorado. If you want to check it out, Dateline is open every Saturday, 12 to 5, Wednesday, the 16th, 5 to 7 p.m. Sunday, the 20th, they'll be open 1 to 6 p.m. And Wednesday, the 30th, for the Artist Tales, 6 to 10 p.m. Find all this information in this week's episode notes and on Peter's websites, PaCT.report, sociometry.com, and ispress.co, and on his Instagram at is.press and at pact.report. For the Tenant Podcast, I'm Todd Pearson.
And I'm Wes Brown.
Have a great week.